Morning, everyone. Let's begin, call the meeting to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No. So, first off, this is going to be about our 268th town meeting, and I am glad everyone came out on a cold morning to join us. I do have a kind of a sad announcement that I'm going to start off with, in that I learned yesterday that Mary Allen, Jim Doggett's mother, and a much-loved member of our community, passed on yesterday morning. Mrs. Allen was devoted to Newton, served our community in many, many ways. She was a mentor to me, and I think many of the other people involved in the community here have had a similar situation and benefited from her expertise and support and guidance. Mrs. Allen joined the town's first master plan committee and helped draft the town's first zoning ordinance. She served as a selectman on the planning board, including as an alternate at the last meeting in January. I believe she was still participating. As assistant town clerk and tax collector. For 35 years, she represented the town on the Rockingham Planning Commission. Mrs. Allen also represented Newton and our neighboring community, East Kingston, as a state representative for 18 years. Mrs. Allen served recently also as a trustee of the trust funds, as well as I noted as an alternate on the planning board. She will be missed by everyone in town. Her dedication and service to our community stands as an example for all of us. To Jim, her other family members and friends, I'd like to express our condolences on behalf of the community, and I'd like to ask us all just to take a moment of silence to reflect on her life, her achievements, and what she's done for our community. Thank you. So today we have with us our selectmen, and I'm going to go in order. Matt Burrell, Chairman, Bob Marchand, Vice Chairman, Charlie Melvin, and Mike Connolly. We have also several people who are joining us for this meeting. Jim O'Mara, who's our interim town administrator, Chris Hilton from Donahue, Tucker, and Ciandella, who is a law firm representing and assisting the town. Both Mr. O'Mara and Mr. Hilson are not Newton residents. They may be providing guidance to the board. To the extent you as voters want to hear from them, I'll give you a quick opportunity if that time comes up just to give an approval of that, since they are non-residents, but they may have valuable input for us this morning. Our town clerk, Mary Jo McCullough, to my left. For the supervisors of the checklist, Marcy Vincent, who came out this morning and is helping on that, and our cable committee, Diane Morin and James Saucier, who are helping people who are at home as well watch us. I have a few comments to start off with. Probably one of the most important ones, so I'll say it first, is that we do have people watching who are not here. So although it's tempting just to stand up at your chair and say something, if we can use the microphones, that helps, because otherwise the people watching us from a distance have no idea what we're saying, and that makes their experience more challenging. So we're here today to do, as I'm looking and seeing a lot of familiar faces, to do what we normally do, which is to discuss the warrant articles, to amend them if necessary, and then finally put them on the ballot. So we'll try to move through the warrant quickly. We have a lot of items that are kind of there for regulatory reasons or because they're part of the process, and many of us have seen those articles before and are familiar with them. But at the same time, we want to make sure that people are informed about them and that any issues and questions have come up and been discussed. As we do this, we may come into some instances where there are issues in wording, typos, misspellings, and occasionally there are changes which have been recommended, say, by the DRA, who looks the department in the state that looks at revenue administration. And so we also may run into instances where we're just trying to find the right words to express something. In those instances, I'll be conducting things, as you know, a little more informally than perhaps some other moderators might do, so we can move through it more quickly. Remember, second session of the town meeting happens on Tuesday, March 14th at the fire station. Not here. We'll be having the voting at the fire station from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. We're hoping it's a nice warm day and that we don't all freeze over there. And I'm looking at the chief right now who's hoping the heat's working. And then also, as a reminder to the members of the community here, the school district deliberative session occurs on Wednesday, February 8th at 7 p.m. at the Sanborn Regional High School over in Kingston. Of course, all Newton residents are welcome to attend. I think it's important for everyone to participate in the school deliberative process as well, because of course that's a very important part of our community. So, on to the warrant. And I'm glad I brought my glasses with me so I can read it. So, this is the town warrant for 2023 for the town of Newton. To the inhabitants of the town of Newton, New Hampshire, in the county of Rockingham, in said state qualified to vote in town affairs, you're hereby notified to meet for the first session of the annual meeting. You already knew that. Which shall be for the explanation, discussion, and debate of each warrant article and the transaction of all business other than voting by official ballot, to be held at the Newton Town Hall on Saturday, February 4th, 2023 at 9 a.m. Second session to be held at the Newton Fire Station, 8D Merrimack Road in said Newton on Tuesday, the 14th day of March next at 8 o'clock in the forenoon to choose all necessary town officers for the ensuing year by official ballot and to vote on all issues before the town of Newton on the official ballot. Polls to be open at 8 in the forenoon to close not earlier than 8 o'clock in the evening. So the first item is just simply to elect all necessary town officers. We don't have to do anything with that. Here's the first article we get to work on. Shall the town of Newton raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $4,792,352. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $4,056,753, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town of Newton or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, sections 10 and 16, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Estimated budget increase from the 2022 actual budget to the 2023 proposed budget represents a tax impact increase of $1.21 or 1.213 or $1.21 roughly per $1,000 of assessed value. Default budget will result in an estimated tax impact increase of 0.086 or about 9 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. Board of Selectmen recommended this article 3-1. I will hand off to the chairman to speak to that issue. Mr. Burrow.
Can I have 1 second? Mary Jo, check your mic.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
All right. Thank
All right.
you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. As anyone who has read this can see, a huge jump in terms of the proposed budget. I feel, it is my opinion, it's a realistic budget. However, I understand that many of us have had enough reality in terms of inflation over the last year plus, right? We gave the department heads the goal of keeping everything flat. However, it's all the stuff we deal with at home, right? Electricity is through the roof, heating oil, fuel for vehicles. In the meantime, attrition is a real problem, not only here in town, but where everybody works. So we've had to adjust salaries and wages in order to be competitive in the market. And by the way, the market is not only southern New Hampshire, it's northern Massachusetts too, in terms of geographically where people want to work. So with all of this, the board got together. We've been looking at proposed department budgets since October, and we arrived at this number. It's not a number we're excited about. However, like I said, we feel it's realistic based on everything that's going on in the world. Let's face it, if we're to go to a default, the town is not going to shut down. The town is going to survive. It's going to be a tough year, much like at home. If somebody lost their job, you would still go on, but you would have to cut some things out in order to get by because you'd have less money to work with. That's what we're going to be faced with. That's what we would have to do. So I was one of the 3 selectmen who voted in favor of recommending this. It's one of those things not happy about, but it's kind of the way it is. And I would invite, with your permission, Mr. Moderator, any department heads who want to talk about their individual budgets and what went into that. Diane's raising her hand.
So I have a question for protocol. Are we allowing people on Zoom to ask questions?
I
Put it up to
I was going to say the voters get to make the rules ultimately. So I'm going to just pose that question for 1 second to the voters. Are we in favor of allowing people who are on Zoom to ask questions? They can't vote, but can they ask questions?
Yes.
Anybody opposed? There's your answer.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, if we do have questions coming up, if we can kind of put them in order, Diane, and maybe you can wave on their behalf.
Okay.
I do think that it would be wise to just for the putting it in order, kind of, if there are department heads who would like to speak to the budget, we'll certainly welcome, you're certainly welcome to do so, and go in whatever order you choose.
Good morning, John Algadino, Fire Chief. Excuse me, as the chairman just explained, the cost of goods and services have gone up for the fire department. Our call volume has drastically increased. Last month, we did close to 76 calls. Our calls are getting longer. The town population is growing. The age of our residents also getting a little high. We're doing a lot more EMS, and our budget reflects what it's going to take to continue providing the service that the town expects and that I expect, and what everyone that is a visitor in town expects. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for those of you who've come out. Thank you those who are on Zoom. Mike Jewett, Police Chief for the town of Newton. I'm going to mirror what the Fire Chief said. Basically, everything he said, we're feeling the same things. In addition to that, one of the reasons my budget went up higher than it normally would is we're having staffing issues. I've got guys that are working solo patrols. In today's day and age, that's not a safe thing to do. So we're adding an officer. So we're trying to add additional officers on, so the officers have officer safety. It's safety for the community, safety for us. Unfortunately, that stuff costs money. So, we cut back on some other things, and we're just trying to do the basics of what we need to get done. Thank you.
Chief Alcadino.
Just would like to inform the board and the public, the road agent is on an emergency call. He will attend the meeting as soon as he can free up. He's doing his best to get here. He's been at the call for almost an hour now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions regarding Article 2, the budget?
I have one on Zoom. Are we okay to do Zoom?
Sure.
Okay, Roger, you're up. This is Roger Hamill.
Yeah, thank you very much. I noticed, I went to the public hearing on January 16th, and the number for the default budget was considerably higher than the number that you now have for the default budget. How did that change?
So I would say, Roger, that would be an example of a fresh set of eyes, re-examining the default budget and adjusting to make sure it's more in line with the spirit of the statute. So this is, a lower default than at the public hearing, which we got together as a board and examined. So this default, we're more confident is in line with what the statute says.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments or proposed amendments regarding Article 2, the budget? Seeing there are none, Article 2 will go on the ballot as presented.
Mr. Moderator, I make a motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 2.
Do we have a
Second.
second? Second. Any discussion on the motion to ban reconsideration? And let me just give a 2-second primer for people who may not be familiar with that. Procedurally, the body, that is you, the voters, can choose to not revisit or go back to an article that you've already discussed later in the meeting. And to put this in a historical perspective and why that ability is vested in the voters is back in the days when we had a straight up town meeting where we made all the decisions at the meeting. The meeting went on for a long time, and sometimes people would wait till late in the day when their opponents had disappeared or the crowd was smaller, and then they would bring an article back up. And then they would vote differently on it at that point in time after some of the voters had gone home thinking that they'd achieved their goals. So you have the power to prevent yourselves from coming back to that article later in the meeting and changing it. And a very common thing to do in meetings. We don't normally do it here because it's a pretty small crowd and I think people know, what normally happens. But there can be discussion on it if anyone wants to discuss that. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes carry, so that we will not reconsider or, go back to the budget motion. Article 3, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,200 to be deposited into the Engineering and Renovation Capital Reserve Fund created in 2015. Said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance with no monies to be raised by taxation. This article would result in no increase in the amount to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend this article unanimously, or 4-0. Do we have someone from the board who'd like to discuss that, who'd like to take up that matter?
Yeah, I would just jump in and say the number one thing is this would result in no tax increase. So hopefully that will make it successful. But this is the one we've been seeing for a while. As I think most people know, we do have a tenant at 8 Merrimack Road. And in order for us to use the rental income, then we have to have this warrant article so we can move the funds, so we can use it to fix things on the buildings and all that stuff. So that's what this one is all about.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing there is none, Article 3 will go on the ballot as presented.
Mr. Moderator, I make a motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 3.
I knew that one was coming. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes carry. No reconsideration on Article 3. On to Article 4. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to be deposited into the Town Buildings Capital Reserve Fund created in 2006. Said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance with no monies to be raised by taxation. This article would result in no increase in the amount to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend this article unanimously.
I'll go ahead.
Mr. Burrow?
So this is one that we've seen the last couple of years. So we have aging buildings. In an effort not to have to increase the budget line item to repair things about these buildings, and also to have the flexibility to use this money for, whatever we think is a short-term fix or a long-term fix. We've been doing this, taking funds from the unassigned fund balance to put it into this usable account. And again, this would result in no increase in the amount to be raised by taxes.
Just as a side comment, this money could be used to unfreeze the sink.
That's true.
Yes.
Did you forget to tell us?
That's true.
And I'm also getting a very astutely designed and careful advisory or reminder from Diane that I was supposed to say something at the beginning of the meeting, which is due to the, shall we say, seasonably cold weather, because we are in the middle of winter, the restroom on this floor has frozen pipes. So anyone desiring to use such a facility would be well advised to use the one on the first floor.
It's heated.
It's heated. And part of the reason I think that that's important to note is that it would be a good thing. That's a great example of we have a wonderful historic building here, but I think when this building was built, some modern designs and standards in terms of ventilation and things like, I don't even think plumbing was invented when this building was built. But so thank you for the reminder to make that notice. So anyone who does want to use the facilities should probably use the one on the first floor, which has heat.
Yes.
Good thing.
Yep.
Okay, yes, sir. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Jamie Fitzpatrick from Walnut Farms, Newton. Just a question on these two articles are mentioning that no funds are to be raised by taxes. You got an $800,000 increase in the regular budget. You're gonna have a struggle getting people to vote for that, voting for these in addition. Can you spend a couple of minutes explaining for the community that's watching or that's here, where are the funds coming from? The first one you mentioned, there's rental income that we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. But they both say unassigned funds. So could you spend some time, where are the unassigned funds coming from? I mean, ultimately they came from taxes, but is there some balance in an account? Could you explain that to help people understand what is being meant when you say it's coming from unused funds?
So we're talking about the revolving fund, right? So typically there's a underrun at the end of the year that the money that was raised by taxes we didn't use would go into this balance, correct? So the goal has been with this, whenever possible, is we try to use those funds to do things like this that we put in front of the voters in the warrant articles so that we can use them later on to, decrease the burden that would be on the proposed budget. We also, like we did this year, reserving some of that money to decrease the tax impact on the town, right? I don't have to tell Jamie, the school is another entity, right? That is part of the tax impact for the town. What is it, 83%, something like that? It's huge. So with the funds that are available there, and I will say in the time I've been on the board, I've noticed how much it has gone down. Like it seemed to be a bigger amount. Because a lot of people will say, why don't you just always use that fund, Why don't you just keep going in there? Well, DRA has some guidelines about how much we should leave in reserve there. And then what we typically do November or December, I think it is when we vote whether to use some of that to reduce the tax impact. This year, if you were following, we voted not to use, I believe we used a smaller amount of that this year, or
No, we didn't.
we didn't use any. We didn't use any this year because our fear is what's going to happen at the end of 2023 in terms of inflation and that tax impact. So does that make sense? I'm not the world's foremost expert on it, but does that answer your question, I should say?
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I mean, I just
Here
think
comes the
that should
world's
be explained to
foremost
people that are watching, and also if there's a fund balance as to what that balance is presently.
Yeah, and it was just handed, this is like the old news thing, like an update was just handed to me. So roughly 2.4 million, so. Like I said, it used to sound like a lot of money, but that was before eggs went up. Robert and I were talking, thank God we don't have to buy eggs for the town, right? So everything's climbing.
other questions, comments, discussion, or amendments regarding Article 4? We're good on Zoom?
Yep, I don't see, hang on, give me 1 second. Yep, we're good.
Okay. So, seeing there are none, Article 4 will go on the ballot as presented. I'm guessing there's going to be a motion coming from my left.
Mr. Moderator, I make a motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 4.
How about a second on that?
Second.
I got to get these guys up to speed here. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. No reconsideration on Article 4. On to Article 5. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate as proposed by the police chief the sum of $25,000 to be deposited into the Police Cruisers and Equipment Capital Reserve Fund created in 2021. This article would result in an estimated .038 or about 4 cents increase per $1,000 of assessed value to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend this article 4-0. Chief, would you like to speak to that?
Morning, Mike Jewett, Police Chief. Give you a little bit more insight on that particular warrant article. What that's for is for when our cruisers go down or if equipment breaks. We do have a line item in the budget that covers that, but this is what covers beyond that. I think last year we used the entire line item that was in there. So this helps us offset any cruiser damage or mechanical work or anything like that. I've said it before and I don't want to keep saying it. Our fleet is aging. And with some of the aging cars, we're having some issues that require more than regular maintenance. So it's for the higher expense things that we use.
Any other questions or comments on Article 5? Yes, sir.
John Sylvia, 41 Highland Street. I just want to start by saying, I love our first responders. I think they should have everything that they need first and foremost. I guess my question is, if we have this 2.4, what's the rationale from not appropriating funds to them out of that as opposed to raising taxes? That's what I would like to understand.
All right, sorry, I caught the end of that question. So if I get the question correctly, is
So we have this leftover budget
2.4, yeah?
that we have guidelines for, which I understand.
Right.
And they need 25,000, which I think they should get.
Yep.
I just want to understand the rationale on raising the taxes to get that 25,000 to them, which I think they should have.
Yep.
As opposed to taking out of this excess fund that we have.
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, it could go either way, right? But I think, speaking as one vote on the Board of Selectmen, my thinking always is what would the town find palatable? And I think for this amount and the tax increase for this one, I felt the town would probably find that palatable. We could just as easily change that, as you said, and we could take it with zero tax impact out of the 2.4, but it would be another reason for dipping into that amount and reducing it even further. So that I can only speak for myself. That's how I voted to, or that's why I voted to recommend this as one of the four.
Yes, sir.
I guess the other part of it is if the voters vote this warrant article down, do we have another means to get them the funds that they need?
No. Well, if there's something already existing on the books, right, they can use that, because this is a non-lapsing account, so if he has any money left in there, right, he could use that, but this amount, picture in time, no.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Dan Guide, 15 Bartlett Street. I know you probably can't get it right now, can you get us the totals on this warrant article and the next one? The police and the fire that you guys are looking to deposit?
You mean the total of the whole warrant article?
No. You want to deposit 25 grand into it. What's in it currently?
Oh, what's in it currently?
And same thing for the
Yep.
next one.
Yep,
So for 5 and 6?
yep.
Why don't we take a second to see if we can get that data? Because it might be pretty close by. Is that easy to figure out,
Yep.
what that current balance is?
And Chief, do you want to speak to this? So the expendable trust fund, police cruiser and equipment, right? That's the,
70,
yeah, that's the one we're talking about though, right? Yeah. This is, and Jim just gave me this on the way in. This was as of 12/31. And you do accrue, is this the one you accrue from details? Goes into this
nope,
one?
not this one.
Okay.
That's a completely different.
So this one is at 70,000 roughly right now. So. And I do, when it comes up, I do have the fire one too. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, or amendments? Yes, sir.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Again, I want to make sure that they get this, but I also am concerned that if it's not voted in, that they still have the means to keep everything that they need. So if the voters vote this down, they don't get that 25,000, is there a backup plan to get them what they need to have that in their reserve? Because, I'm not sure how many cruisers they have, but 70,000 isn't a lot of maintenance, especially on a vehicle that's driven every day, all day.
And we should probably have the chief weigh in on this, but essentially you just described it, right? Is the reserve would be what you'd have to work with, Chief. Do you agree with that?
Yep, I'd agree with that. So the answer to that question is $70,000 in there. As you're aware, mechanical issues and different things cost more money. That's for vehicles that are beyond the regular maintenance, oil changes, that type of stuff. So if it doesn't get voted in, yes, we have that money there, but that's it. I can't go and get it from another account. That's money is there. Ultimately, what that will be for is if we get into a default or something later on, is I'll have enough to buy a car if I lose a car. That's why it's at 70,000 now. I have dipped into it to repair cars. I really don't want to dip into that account at all because I'm more worried about replacing a car. And we try to lease our vehicles, that way there we have payments spread out over time. Instead of doing 12 payments, we do 1 to 2 payments per year. But I couldn't do that out of that account with the amount of money that's in there now because there's not enough money in there to rotate to buy a car. Hopefully that answered that question.
And to what Chief just said, a lot of people don't understand that it's not just a car when he needs to replace it, it's also all that equipment that needs to be put into that car, which is what really drives up the cost. And one cost of the car fully equipped would wipe that account basically out, and then he would have nothing in there to be able to work with if an emergency arose.
So Chief, you talked about an aging fleet. How aged are they?
To answer that question, I mean, there's a few cars. It just so happened yesterday we got a flat tire in one of the cars. I went out to assist with the flat tire, realized that there was actually no heat in the car. The heater core is completely plugged up and we have no heat in it. That car's got 137,000 miles on it, and I believe it's a 2007. Doing quick math on it, there is a formula that you can do with 137,000 miles to figure out the hours that it runs. I'll give you an example. I have a 2003 pickup truck that has 230,000 miles. That's my personal truck. That has over 8,000 hours on it. So give that consideration to the amount of hours. My truck does not sit on the side of the road. It doesn't idle for 8 hours per shift. That's actual driving. So the mileage, 137,000 to a regular car isn't very high. For a cruiser, 137,000 miles, you got to think about the hours that car sat on the side of the road running, the stop and go, the fast, acceleration, deacceleration. It's not healthy for the cars, but it's unfortunately that's what we do to them. They are beefed up a little bit for a police vehicle. They have heavier suspension, heavier parts in them, but they still brake just like anything else. So we've got a few that are over 120,000. The oldest one I think that we have in the fleet right now is 12 or 13 years old. That's a frontline car. It really should be unacceptable that it shouldn't be out there. We do our best to maintain them, and I'll say this to kind of go along with what you were asking your question about the maintenance. On your personal cars, you don't have to worry about the brakes as much, the tires as much. As long as they pass inspection, you're good to go. With a cruiser and having the tires have to be in great shape all the time, the brakes have to be in great shape all the time, more than your personal car. So it costs more money to operate these vehicles. The oil changes have to be fully synthetic because they're running more often, and the cost just goes up and up. Hopefully I've answered the questions that anyone had. If anyone has any more, I'm more than happy to answer them. Seeing there's none, I'm good.
All right. Do we have any other comments, questions, or we have, yes?
I would actually like to make an amendment to this article to add to the end of the capital reserve fund created in 2021, to add the words, said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance with no money to be raised by taxation.
We have a second. Second. Discussion on the amendment.
I don't know if we want to explain that.
I think we have a pretty good idea. I think we've already talked
Well, I
through
mean,
it.
so in other words, that change would be exactly what you asked about, right? So we would be taking from the 2.4, and as it says, it wouldn't be raised by taxes. So,
Right, yeah. That has the parallel effect, which we don't need to do as an amendment because we traditionally do it this way, that it would strike the estimated increase amount because, of course, that's now 0. And so, discussion on the amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Amendment carries. So, for the overall article, do we have any further discussion or amendment? I do have to give the selectmen the opportunity to revise their recommendation on the article, though I'm pretty sure I know what the vote's going to be. Do any of the selectmen feel a need to revisit
So,
their
so
recommendation?
point of order, just, I think I know the answer, but so the kind of point behind the article is changed. If we keep the same recommendation as written, we'll be recommending the change, right? So we don't have to re-vote to recommend, for example, 4-0, the change.
No,
We
correct.
can leave it as,
You
yeah,
have the opportunity,
yeah.
as a board of selectmen, to take to discuss it amongst yourselves,
Yeah.
take a new vote
Yeah.
if you think you're going to change your position, right? And I'm sort of asking the board
So,
that question.
yeah.
I'm getting a pretty strong feedback because I'm
So-
seeing nodding heads all around me.
Well, let me,
In fact, if you took that vote right now, it would be the exact same vote, and you're welcome to take it if you want.
yeah, so let me do that because we have posted as a select board meeting today as well. So I'll just poll the board. Is starting to my left. Charlie, do you still recommend?
I'm going with Mary Jo.
Right, so you,
Yes.
so you recommend the newly written one. Bob?
Yay.
Yay? Mike?
Yay.
And I'm a yay, so we don't have to touch.
Okay, so do we have any other discussion or amendments on the article as a whole? Seeing there is none, Article 5 as amended will be placed on the ballot.
Mr. Moderator, I make a motion to restrict reconsideration of Article number 5.
Second.
They're getting the program. They're getting the second automatically. Thank you. All in favor of the motion to prevent reconsideration?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Ayes carry. No reconsideration. All right, great. On to Article 6. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate as proposed by the fire chief the sum of $25,000 to be deposited into the Fire Apparatus and Equipment Refurbishment Fund, Capital Reserve Fund created in 2005 and amended in 2011. This article would result in an estimated 0.038 or about 4 cents increase per thousand of assessed value to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend this article 4-0. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Burrow if you want for the board, and I think
And then the
first thing
chief,
you want to say is-
exactly, right. So I just have a feeling somebody's going to ask
Ask
what
that question,
what the amount currently is, so I do have it here. Fire apparatus and equipment refurbishment fund, ending balance as of 12/31 is $40,000 in change. So, Chief?
Good morning. As the moderator stated, this fund, per se, has been since 2005 for the past several years, when the fire departments had a large item, apparatus of the fire station. We did not ask for any funds. It's always been, to my knowledge, 50,000. Last year we asked for 75,000, just due to the cost of apparatus. They're ranging anywhere from 400,000 on up. It was the only warrant article last year that was denied. We were going to ask for 50,000 this year, but due to the economy and thinking of the taxpayers, we dropped it to 50,000. So I would ask if the board is going to make a recommendation to come out of the other account and not affect the taxes, that the board would respectfully raise it back to what the fire department has been asking. We have aging vehicles. We have, 2 years ago, we replaced two of the, they weren't the oldest, they was, we'll say the oldest in the fleet that were costing the taxpayers the most to repair. We still have an 1985, I think it's a 93, a 95. We have a 05 ambulance. That average life expectancy on an ambulance is about 15 years. To answer the question, there has, monies have come out of that budget, out of that line for the past few years to repair the vehicles, because the average cost for a regular service on a fire apparatus to meet NFPA standards for regular service, chassis, pump service, pump recertification is anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500, not counting repairs. Last year, the fire department spent $15,000 to replace a turbo in one of the fire apparatus. So, with all due respect, if the board is going to do any amendment, I would respectfully ask that you raise the amount if it's possible. Thank you.
Mr. Mello.
I'd like to make a motion to increase the $25,000 to $50,000 and have the money come from the unexpended fund balance.
Okay, discussion on the amendment. So let me just hold on for 1 second. Well, come on up. I'm just gonna, to make it clear textually, we would be changing the $25,000 to $50,000, and we would be adding the same sentence at the end of the phrase, the capital, which, the capital reserve fund amended in 2011, we'd be adding the sentence, said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance with no monies to be raised by taxation. Same amendment we made on Article 5. Yes.
Lisa Gonner, Newton resident. I just need to caution everyone here that if we keep adding to come from the unencumbered fund balance, which is also the unassigned fund balance, which is also the fund that the board has suggested they may take from to help reduce the tax rate, well, if we keep doing from the unencumbered fund balance, there isn't going to be anything that they can take to reduce the tax rate. We need to be careful which warrant articles we're actually doing that on.
Thank you. Other comments or questions regarding the amendment? Mr. Simone.
Good morning, Joe Simone, Newton residents. Could the Board of Selectmen please tell the residents the percentage of that 2.4 million that the state requires you to keep on hand?
Yes, we can.
Do you have it?
Between 10% and 17%, and right now I believe we're at 10%.
Yep. Okay.
we have further discussion or questions?
Just for clarification purposes, you said 10 and 17%?
They want you to keep it between 10 and 17%, and we're probably right around 10%.
We
So
have a $4
can't
million
go-
budget, though.
Yes.
So 2.4 million.
Won't cover that.
No, no,
You
no.
have to raise your tax. Go ahead, sorry.
So like 10% of $4 million budget is $400,000.
It's, I guess so, that's the math, sure.
That's where I'm going with it. I'm just trying to figure it out. That's
Can
all.
we recognize the interim town admin?
Would you like to explain that? Yes. Okay, I'm just going to ask the voters very quickly. Our town manager's not a Newton resident.
Town admin.
So I'm just going to ask you very quickly, do you want to hear what he has to say? I think it would be quite interesting. All in favor, yeah, we're fine. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. When calculating the 10 to 17% that you want to have in your unassigned fund balance, it also includes the town's obligation to the schools, which inflates the number more to the 10%.
Thank you. Right, but that obligation, I'm sure, is large. That's why that number, that's why that number. Okay. It's rare that a moderator asks the question. I'm going to ask the question because maybe, it's a worthwhile question to ask. Are we going to be precluded by the DRA because we have an insufficient reserve from making those transfers, even if they are voted by the voters?
That is a question I do not know.
I believe, and maybe Jim knows this, that is not a hard and fast rule. That is guidance by the DRA. Is that correct? You don't? Okay. So.
No, there are two sources
Okay.
of guidelines. One's from the
Sorry, we need, yeah.
We need to use the mic just so the people on Zoom can hear it.
One source is from the New Hampshire Municipal Association, the other's from the DRA, and the range is from 7% to 17%. If you're within that, then you're adhering to both recommendations from both sources.
Yeah. And again, it's a recommendation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was what I was trying to understand. And people who are not involved in this a lot, myself included, are not that familiar probably with what the DRA is. I'm just going to say it again for the benefit of people that are learning about this process. The DRA is the Department of Revenue Administration. They're a state agency that deals with tax rate setting, sort of accounting, how the fund balances are tracked and all that kind of stuff. And they are a large and, shall I say, probably opaque organization with a lot of experts of their own, and they have an opinion about everything. So, they're a useful input, but at the same time, they can be hard to understand. When I saw the town manager and town council both kind of looking like who knows, I think from when I've read DRA opinions, you can read the letter they sent you, and you're still not sure what they're trying to tell you because they're kind of experts in the field and they're aiming their responses in a very highly technical fashion. But anyway, so we are back to the amendment is on the floor.
I would like to make a comment.
Mr. Marchand.
So I would like to remind everybody, and there's a biblical term out there. It's called robbing Peter to pay Paul. And that's part of the problem that we've had in this town, is that this town has tried to hold the line item budgets for equipment, for payroll, for all of that, right? So that is the reason why we're looking at this budget being the way that it is, because all of a sudden, we had to go from holding that line item, which was way down here, to where we are now with the cost of everything that's going on. So if we continue to take from this one budget and not put anything in it, the same thing is going to happen. So now what's going to take place is that the Board of Selectmen's hands are going to be tied if an emergency comes up and those funds are needed to take care of the town, the buildings, or whatever, like you were just was brought up about the heating and the systems and stuff. Because without that money being in there, then we have no money to do anything, and there is nothing that we would be able to do for the town.
Ms. Gardner.
Let's call this housekeeping. You make some excellent points. However, they have nothing to do with the warrant article or the amendment we're voting on. which is just whether or not to include, to come from unencumbered fund balance.
Beg to differ, because
No.
if you've taken the money
It's not
out,
the,
One person talking at a time, because we keep...
we're not talking about the operating budget. We are talking about a separate warrant article and whether or not the funds should come from the unencumbered fund balance or from collected by taxes. That's all we're discussing right here, and whether or not we want to make that amendment. I just don't want the people here confused about what we're actually voting on, and that's all we're voting on.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Sylvia?
And I do agree with Selectman Marchand. My reason for looking at it this way is that if we don't get them the money and we leave it in the hands of the voters, and much like most people do, they look down at the bottom line, which is my taxes are going up, and then our first responders don't have the money that they need. That's my concern, and that's why I like that the motion is up right now.
Any other discussion? Mr. Guide?
Dan Guide, just a question if you guys know off the top of your head. If you don't, it's fine. How much went in last year to the unassigned fund balance?
None, right, Chief?
I don't think
It-
No, not
Oh.
to that,
To
to the
that article.
2.4 million that
Yep.
is in there, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
How much went in last year? If you know, it's fine. If you don't, I'll figure it
I
out.
don't think we do. I mean, we can get it and put it out there, right? So, but we don't have it at the fingertips, so.
Mr.
Yeah, Jamie Fitzpatrick again. Just for clarification, the school was mentioned, so I thought I'd provide this information because I'm on the school board. The school board has unassigned funds also, and the school board unassigned funds are capped at 2.5% is the most that you can withhold. Everything else goes back to the taxpayers on an annual basis. So anybody wondering what the school does, I thought I'd throw that out since schools were mentioned.
Any other comments, questions, or discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment to Article 6, which would raise the sum from $25,000 to $50,000 and add the sentence at the end, said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance with no monies to be raised by taxation. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carry.
Okay, so I'll do the same thing again, and I'd like to...
Full board, right.
Yeah, just before I pull the board, I will say what Ms. Gagne had kind of said. I totally understand what you're saying there. I'm hoping this isn't a trend, I think is what is going. But I understand the fact, where we want to make sure that the first responders have what they need, and it could be a tough year. So polling the board, do we still recommend? I think without polling the board, we still recommend 4-0 because I heard no nays, right?
Yep.
So we're good to go. Thank you.
Right. So any further discussion on Article 6? Seeing there is none, Article 6 will go on to the ballot as amended by the voters.
Mr. Moderator, I make a motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. No reconsideration. So I'm going to make a brief kind of introduction here to Articles 7 and 8. 7 and 8 go together in that they're on a common topic, and they are interlocked in the sense that if they don't both pass, there's wording that says, okay, they're contingent upon each other. So the order they're presented, probably the substantive discussion is more related to the second one, in the sense that the one that's first on the warrant, it's not clear what's going on as much as when you read the second one in 8, you know what the purpose of 7 is. So if you'd rather discuss them out of order, we can. Or I would just recommend to anyone who hasn't kind of read them both that, read 8 and think about it before we talk about 7. So would anyone would we rather take 8 just to talk about it first? Because 7's kind of like a cleanup of 8 or an administrative process related to 8. Okay, so I'm seeing nodding heads. Is the body in favor of discussing, solely for discussion purposes, Article 8 prior to Article 7? All in favor?
Yeah.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so we're just going to discuss 8. We're not going to change its position on the warrant or anything. We're just going to discuss it out of order. So, Article 8, I'm going to read it first. We can talk about it, then we'll go back to Article 7. To see if the town will vote, this is Article 8, to see if the town will vote to establish an emergency management revolving fund pursuant to RSA 31:95H for the purpose of providing and maintaining government services during emergencies as deemed appropriate by the government body. Further, to see if the town will vote to authorize the town to deposit into the revolving fund all or any part of the revenues from state or federal grants, any other state or federal funding program, or from any other source as approved by the legislative body for deposit into the revolving fund. Further, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $8,417.25 to be deposited in the revolving fund, said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance and constituting the anticipated final balance of the Emergency Operations Center Expendable Trust Fund. The money in the revolving fund shall be allowed to accumulate from year to year and shall not be considered part of the town's general fund unassigned fund balance. The Board of Selectmen shall be the agents to expend from the revolving fund. The town treasurer shall have custody of all monies in the fund and shall pay out the same only upon order of the Board of Selectmen, and no further approval of the legislative body shall be necessary to expend. The monies in the revolving fund may be expended for maintaining government services, including but not limited to payroll, equipment, supplies, maintenance and repairs, utilities, and fuel. This article is contingent upon the town meeting's approval of Article 7, and if the town meeting does not approve Article 7, this article shall be null and void. This proposed article will result in no increase in the amount to be raised by taxes, and it does note the Board of Selectmen recommended this article as well as 7. 7 is the converse side of that, closing out the existing fund, which has a similar purpose or name. So let's talk about 8 as we go through that. Ms. Gagner, looks like you're ready with a comment, question, or her amendment.
Right, Lisa Gagner, resident. I have a couple of concerns with this particular warrant article, not with the money, by the way. That's not my problem. It is with the wording of this warrant article. The first problem I have is to vote to establish an emergency management revolving fund. The problem I have is the town already has an emergency management revolving fund. This is going to be an accounting nightmare. Nobody's going to know which emergency management revolving fund we're actually depositing funds into. That's my first problem. It says it is for the purpose of providing and maintaining government services during emergencies as deemed appropriate by the government body. The one that was created in 2015 says it is for the purpose of paying emergency management, payroll, training, and other expenses. Basically, it sounds like the same purpose for the services for running the emergency management. I'm trying to figure out what makes this one different. The only thing I can see different with substance between the two is the funds that are going into each of the different accounts. The one created in 2015 only has monies received from the state of New Hampshire for emergency management purposes. The new one being proposed has all or any part of the revenues from state or federal grants, any other state or federal funding program, or from any other sources. I have a problem with the "or from any other sources." There is no codicil or limitation such as what was on the original saying for emergency management purposes, which means technically, legally, any funds that comes in from federal, state, or any other state or federal funding program or any other source could be deposited into this emergency management fund if it's approved. There's nothing that excludes any type of fund from going into this fund. I'm not saying the board's gonna do it, I'm not saying EMD is gonna do it, but I have seen things happen in the past. The people need to be protected. I do think we need to also add into this that it is funds intended for emergency management operation purposes. I also think we need to change the emergency management revolving fund to read emergency management operations revolving funds, just to have a distinction between the two. Thank you.
Thank you. Trish.
Tricia McCarthy, acting EMD. Boy, Lisa, I wish we talked earlier. I wish I could answer questions here, and I don't have information in front of me, but these articles, these warrant articles 7 and 8, we've been gravitating over them. Diane, our new town administrator, DRA, going back and forth to have the correct wording. I don't have everything in front of me, but when we were first discussing these, we'd have to look at the history, but one of the one of the revolving funds, Lisa, and you would know as the keeper of the funds, was by the Board of Selectmen approved to be dissolved. And I think that was our problem, because all we had left was the Ops Center Trust Fund, which we couldn't use during an emergency. Our problem is when there is an emergency, and we call out our EOC staff, which is a minimal amount of people, and we pay the wonderful rate of $14.22 an hour. So, you can tell they're raising their hand to help us. So as a result, we have trouble not only getting people to come out, we have no payroll that could come from a trust fund. So we were told it should be a revolving account, and then when there is an emergency, we can pull from the grants that I've been writing and the reimbursements, which is about, $158,000, I think, at this point, that would go into warrant Article 8 if that's approved. So then we can pay people they're the ones that will go out to your house, bring you water, rations, sometimes we check for generators. We work closely with police, fire, and road because we do have limited resources, but this would allow us to reimburse them in their budget if they help us only during an emergency. Even a federal emergency, they don't pay payroll unless it's overtime. And as many times I've written letters, not only to the governor, but to Homeland Security, we're a call department. So very rarely will they reimburse us if we've got police and fire and road people out for under 40 hours. So we have a huge problem. This fund, we were told, and maybe Jim can speak to it because I know he was involved a little bit, supposedly now we could use this from the grant money, reimburse also if somebody wanted to maybe donate money, which I don't see that happening in this economy, but it would allow us to continue running during an emergency. We have very little payroll, and when we've got an emergency, if we're not getting reimbursed by the feds, the money could come from here. So I don't know if Lisa wants to comment or if anyone can remember that warrant article that was dissolved. And I want to say it wasn't that long ago. Do you know?
Ms. Gagne.
Sorry, I just want to say it's not the particular fund I'm talking about because we currently have $6,000 in that revolving fund.
Really?
Really. So, and that warrant says it is specifically designed for the purpose of paying emergency management payroll training. And I'm just wondering why we didn't just repurpose or expand what sources of income could be deposited into that fund.
That's a great question. I don't know if maybe Jim can help us. I don't know.
So I think if it just makes it easier, can I just, instead of my comments, just make that amendment, motion to amend?
You can, but let me make a suggestion, if I may, a friendly suggestion.
Absolutely.
There are a number of different places where it looks like amendments might be appropriate in the text of this. And I'm also aware of something you're not aware of yet, which is we're going to have probably momentarily some amendments proposed by the DRA.
Then I'm waiting.
From our town collector. No, hold on. So what I'm going to suggest is we do some of the amendments to this article kind of piecemeal. And to the extent that, unless you're going to suggest that we do some kind of an amendment which leads to a merging, like you just mentioned.
No, I don't, that's a little beyond my
Okay,
scope and
so-
for right now.
Okay, what I'm going to suggest, and I haven't seen
That would
anybody
be for
looking-
2024.
I haven't seen town council or anybody over there looking horrified yet, is we work on some of these amendments and kind of get some of the simple ones out of the way first.
Yes.
And I'm going to say, again, I'm here to only kind of shepherd the discussion, it's up to the voters. Probably the issue of naming and the naming being confusing sounds like a good starting point.
Correct.
Because I think nobody wants a confusing name to be the same name, so when we print the spreadsheet out, it's identical. That's only going to create chaos everywhere, the bank, so why don't we start with some simple ones? And I think some of the TRA ones might be like that. You know what I mean? Just
Okay,
really
yeah,
simple
I'm
ones.
willing
So
to hold
how about
off.
you start off, you've got the floor.
Well,
Why
you
don't
said DRA.
No, let's start with the first one you've got, and we'll work our way down from the top.
All
So
right.
Ms. Gagne, let's get up the first amendment.
First amendment that I would move to make is to insert between management and revolving in the name of the fund, the word operations. So it reads to vote to establish an emergency management operations revolving fund. Nice and simple.
Okay, stand right there. Any discussion on that? Second. You got the second, thank you, sir. Any discussion on that? All in favor of adding the word to the phrase emergency management revolving fund, renaming it to the emergency management operations revolving fund? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, done. So we fixed that. Continue, Ms. Gagne.
All right, so the next amendment would follow after or from any other sources to add, give me a second here, intended for emergency management purposes.
Okay, has everyone got that? Okay, so this phrase would be added after, where it says, or from any other sources, subsequent to that say, intended for emergency management services.
Purposes.
Purposes, sorry, my apology, I wrote it down wrong.
Do you want to say emergency management services or operating services? How do you want?
She said
Purposes.
Just want to leave it at that.
Purposes, not services.
Right, I misspoke. I got it wrong the first time. Purposes is what she
Okay.
said. That's why I was trying to make sure I got it right. And we got it right.
Okay.
Okay, so I should probably say it one more time. Ms. Gagne's got the right phrase, but it's intended for emergency management purposes.
Yes.
So discussion on that particular,
I have so
Ms. Moore.
right next to that, it says approved by legislative body. Does that mean
There's a
that?
comma,
Yes,
so it's before the comma.
right, but it says as approved by, so my question would be, does this mean that everything has to go to town vote?
Legislative body
Is
is
the
not the
town.
people.
Is the people,
Oh.
right?
right.
Yeah.
The legislative body is us. So
I'm just thinking if you're making that amendment, do we need to fix that?
can I just,
Do one at a
that there, and again, I'm only trying to expedite the discussion. That is a very important and well-noted point, which should be addressed on its own.
Okay,
I'm
didn't know if
not
it
saying
fell into that.
one way or the other, but I think that sentence as it reads, and I'm looking over there at a gentleman who probably knows, may well suggest that almost any action related to that funding needs a vote of this body. So it needs a warrant article before the funding can happen, which seems like it kind of effectively doesn't do what people think it does. So I'm not expressing a position one way or another, but let's look at that carefully, Ms. Moore, and hold that thought. Let's just deal with this one at a time. Yes. So, Ms. Gagne, we got the text?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're dealing with where the
Right, we're
funds
gonna
are
do,
coming from.
the reason I'm trying to do these amendments by pieces is if we make all of them at once, and try to hold in our heads, and vote on like 5 pieces of text changing, I think that's going to be very difficult. So I'm just trying to get the ones we know or kind of can do piecemeal while people are thinking about some of the more complicated ones. So do we have a second on that amendment? I'm seeing nodding. I want to hear it out loud. Second, all right. So discussion on the amendment, which is at this point, adding the phrase intended for emergency management purposes after other sources and before the comma. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes carry, so the amendment occurs. Now,
As
back,
far as that last one, I'm going to let somebody else deal with that one.
while we're thinking about that issue, because I see people thinking over on that side, which is good, can we tackle the DRA? Okay, so we've got an easy DRA recommendation, which should be a one-liner, and it's almost a typo, but when it comes down to balance amounts, they're supposed to be whole dollar amounts. They like whole dollar amounts. So we're going to amend 8417.25 to 8417.00. I'm just saying that on behalf of the clerk who's making that.
Already done.
Do we have a second on that amendment?
Second.
Second. Anybody opposed? All the ayes?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so
There is one more.
Ms. McCullough, you've got one more, I think, for us.
Okay, let me find it because it doesn't make any sense. And I don't know what this means. I was just told by DRA that this should be removed from the wording of this. Where it's bolded and says to appropriate the sum of $8,417 to be deposited into the revolving fund, said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance. DRA has said we should remove the words and constituting the anticipated fund balance of the Emergency Operation Center Expendable Trust Fund. The explanation from them being that the intent is that this sum represents the discontinued funds from the Expendable Trust Fund.
Do we have any discussion on that amendment? I see head shaking, which is not a good sign.
This is the impenetrable DRA.
Right.
I don't even know.
Well, can you go to the mic?
Yeah, just hang on one second. Mr. Hilson, we want to hear Mr. Hilson. Mr. Hilson, please come up to the mic.
I'm preaching to the choir here. This is some of the impenetrable stuff you get from DRA. I don't understand this amendment. Why wouldn't you strike said funds to come from the unassigned fund balances? Because it's not coming from the unassigned fund balance. It's coming from the discontinued emergency ops center revolving fund. So I don't understand the amendment itself, but in all candor, sometimes it's better to just go along with with what the RA is saying.
Right, and I think in the context of 7,
Right.
it makes sense because that pushes the money into the fund. Right.
Yeah, I can understand that. So you're gonna discontinue the fund, move it into the unassigned fund balance, then move it out from the unassigned fund balance into the new revolving.
And an accountant at the DRA is going to be happy about the whole thing.
Right. So do what DRA says.
Yeah, do what the DRA says. That's the point. Do what the DRA says in something like this. Do what the DRA says. So we got that? So again, this amendment is just to, it will strike the wording and constituting the anticipated final balance of the Emergency Operations Center Expendable Trust Fund. Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Not to be a pain in the butt, but if you strike that out, then the article reads, we're going to raise money from this. We're going to raise and appropriate as opposed to transfer it from one account to the other account. So you're going to have people that are going to be sitting there to vote and say, well, wait a minute. You're pocketing the first one into the general fund, and you're still going to raise and appropriate $8,400. So it's a double dip. The wording that's being suggested, I think, is going to cause issues with the electorate because looks like you're gonna pocket the 84 from one fund, and you're gonna raise and appropriate an additional 84 if you don't have that language.
Right, but it's another example of the said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance.
Understood, but people know that they paid for the unassigned
I
fund
know
balance.
that. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Vanessa Burrell, Newton resident. I think the confusion is the Article 7 says it shall lapse into the town's general fund, whereas 8 says it's going to come from the unassigned balance, fund balance. So I think those two phrases need to line up, and it'll be a little bit less confusing.
Thank you. Okay, so any further comments, questions, or discussion on this proposed amendment?
The only thing I would add is, you know, Attorney Hilson kind of said it jokingly, but typically if something doesn't come out in the wash after town meeting day, it's usually DRA is the one that helps us get it through the wash, you know what I mean? So if DRA is telling us this, I'm pretty confident we go that way. And Trish thought this would be an easy one. She told me the other day.
Holy moly. Started. So I'm like really confused. The intent this year, we thought, was to clean up the mess we've had in the past so that we could, when we had an emergency, be able to, whether it's buy supplies, pay payroll, only during an emergency, not for other times. And I thought we were guided correctly with this warrant article, but now if this is going before, and maybe the attorney or Jim can explain this, if this has to go before the legislative body, and I'm going to say this as a question, so the grants that I've been writing, and let's say hypothetically, not an exact figure, let's say it's $153,000. The idea was that this would allow our money to go into this account, but if now we have to go through the legislative body, that we got to wait till next March for a vote. So now, again, talk about deficits, I'm still going to be in a deficit, and where does this money, the 150, say 3,000, go for the rest of this year? And am I going to lose it in the unassigned fund balance? Help?
Okay. I'm going to ask you to hold that thought because
Hold that thought.
at this moment trying to deal with the simple DRA fix of getting rid of that phrase.
Oh, sorry, it's a blonde senior moment, sorry.
So, but hold that thought. So, back to the amendment. Any further discussion or comments on the amendment of DRA's request to strike this phrase that reads, and constituting the anticipated final balance of the Emergency Operations Center Expendable Trust Fund? Seeing there's no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carry. So, Ms. Moran, if you would like to have...
I'd like to make amend it to say as approved by the governing body, not the legislative body.
I'll second.
Okay, so, comments, discussion, and I'm just going to throw in a quick tutorial thing for people who may not be that familiar with it. The legislative body is the voters. That is, everybody at this session and also, of course, at the polls on Election Day. The governing body or the government body is the selectmen. So it's a nice way of saying the selectmen. So that amendment would mean that the responsibility for making the approval of those deposits would be the selectmen, not the voters at the annual meeting. So discussion or comments or questions about that aspect of it. I think we already heard Trish's comments on that. Any other comments or discussion? All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes carry, so the amendment, so it will read instead of by the legislative body, by the governing body?
Yes, governing body.
Okay, so I think any issues or amendments that we had sort of stacked up and pending, and the ones from the DRA we've got. So we're back to the main article. Comments, questions, or discussion or amendments regarding Article 8 as a whole? Seeing there are none, Article 8 will go on to the ballot as amended.
Mr. Moderator, I make a motion to restrict reconsideration of article.
That's number 8.
Okay.
You can second it for discussion.
Somebody can second it?
I'll second for discussion. I just wanted to poll the board before we left it.
You get to, I'm going to let you do it. Let's just get him out. Okay. Hang on.
I'm commenting on that.
Okay, go right ahead.
I'd like to wait to vote on that until we finish the discussion on 7, because I think there may be an opportunity for a change once 7's discussed.
Makes sense.
Any other discussion on the motion? And by the way, that's something you can certainly do. Because you can have a vote, you can vote to restrict reconsideration at any time in the future for any previous articles.
Mr. Moderator, I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you. Okay, so you want to Mr. Burrow would like to poll the board regarding their vote on the recommendation for Article 8, correct?
So, correct. Does anybody wish to change their recommendation of Article 8? Polling the 4 members? No? Okay, so we're good.
Okay, so, seeing we have concluded our discussion on 8, and we agreed to take it out of order, let's go back to 7. So, I will read it. Article 7, to see if the town will vote to dissolve the expendable trust fund established in 2009, known as Emergency Ops Center, established for the continuation of town services during an emergency. If approved, any monies in said expendable trust fund, presently in the amount of $8,417.25, plus any accumulated interest to date of withdrawal, will lapse to the town's general fund. This article is contingent upon the town meeting's approval of Article 8, and if the town meeting does not approve Article 8, this article shall be null and void. So, who would like to start on that one? Do we have a selectman, or Trish, you would like to speak to that, or?
Again, with the help of DRA and Diane and Jim, this trust fund, we were told in order to be able to use money during an emergency, it had to be a revolving fund, which is why we thought we'd dissolve this and with help from multiple people come up with warrant Article 8. So that's really, we wanted to dissolve it and put that money, into Article 8 if that's approved.
Thank you. We are going to have an amendment to get rid of that 25 cents. Anybody opposed to that?
Nay.
All in favor? Okay, so make that fix, please, Mary Jo. Any other discussion on, yes, Ms. Burrow?
So I'd like to propose an amendment to change the sentence, shall lapse to the town's general fund, and change it to say, to the town's unassigned fund balance, so it matches the wording in Article 8, or number 8.
I will second that.
I don't know if you can. I'll second it. I'll second that one.
Truth is.
Comments or discussion on the amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Amendment carries. So in Article 7, the text will be amended to stay, instead of the town's general fund, the town's unassigned fund balance.
Quick question for Lisa.
Can we go back to Article 8 now?
We can, yes.
So I just want to ask Lisa, that other fund that she was talking about, this is definitely not that other fund that's out there?
Correct.
Okay.
That's an expendable trust managed by the trustees of trustees.
Could you step up to the microphone
Yeah,
so other
sorry.
people can hear you and
Lisa.
it's recorded for prosperity?
To answer Selectman Marchand's question, the one that is being dissolved is an expendable trust fund managed by the trustee of trust funds. The one that I was discussing, which can be seen in the treasurer's town report, is a revolving fund called the Emergency Management Revolving Fund. Two different types of funds.
All right.
It is a revolving fund, which is what EMD is trying to accomplish. It's just we already have one. Okay, so can I go back to Article 8?
Correct, you can.
All right, there is one more proposed amendment for Article 8, now that I've had a chance to go through this. Where it says, to be deposited in the revolving fund, said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance, we removed what followed. I would like to add, at that point, for it to say, with no monies to be raised by taxation. Exactly the same as it says in Article 3 for the rental income going into the engineering and renovation fund. I figure if DRA didn't have a problem with it on that article, they're not going to have a problem with it on Article 8. And it clarifies there are no taxes to be raised for those funds to go into the account.
Do we have any discussion on that amendment? Seeing there is none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes carry, so the amendment will take place. You got that?
I got it.
That's all right. You're writing all over it at this point. Okay, so, any further discussion, since we reopened it, any further discussion on Article 8? Seeing there is none, Article 8 will go on the ballot as written, and I'm also going to touch Article 7. Hold on. Article 7, do we have any further discussion on Article 7? Seeing there is none, Article 7 will go on the ballot as amended. I'll save you, Mr. Marchand. You can give 7 and 8 in one fell swoop. Just-
Exactly.
there you
Mr.
go.
Moderator, motion to restrict reconsideration of both Articles 7 and 8.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes carried. There will be no reconsideration of Articles 7 and 8. On to Article 9. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,363 for the following community services. Area Home Care and Family Services, $3,800. Child Advocacy Center, $2,000. Drugs Are Dangerous, $2,500. Haven, $3,050. New Hampshire SPCA, $750. The Rockingham County Community Action, $5,000. Rockingham Nutrition Meals on Wheels, $2,927. Rockingham Nutrition Meals on Wheels Transportation, $700. The Sorrock Coalition for Healthy Youth, $4,936. The Vic Geary Center, $2,700. And Waypoint, $2,000, for the total of $30,363. This article would result in an estimated .047, or about 5 cents increase per $1,000 of assessed value to be raised by taxes, was recommended by the selectmen unanimously. Would anybody like to speak to this? This is a pretty standard warrant many of us have seen. Mr. Fitzpatrick? I get it, Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, you got it right.
I got it right. I got it right this time.
I just want to point out when it says it's a 0.047 increase, this will be slightly higher than it was last year, but every year it comes up. So really the only tax implications are the differences between the two, not the full amount. So not that that's a huge number, but just so that people understand, it comes up every single year. So it's really the difference between the two that's got the tax impact. And so it's even less than what you're seeing.
Thank you, that's an important point. Other discussion, questions about the article? Chief? that bumper music coming up the, you know,
It's my
pretty
intro.
impressive, yeah.
Yeah. So, as I've spoke about this for the last few years, these articles, or the number 9 for the services that we use, I mean, the police department relies heavily on those. Not only do we rely heavily on them, but the community relies on them. There's people, could be neighbors, could be someone on another street. We're using these services a lot. I just had a discussion in the back of the room that on some of these, we've probably already expended their line item this year already, which is unfortunate, because that just means they're busy. So, you know, these are all great things. If anyone had any questions on any of them particular ones, I could try to answer anything, but these are services the town uses on a daily basis.
Thank you, Chief. Yes, sir.
Dan Guide, I don't have any real questions. What's the rationale behind not putting this in the budget?
And that question has come up before. If Chief is nodding his head, I believe.
I think I can tackle it.
Oh, you've got it?
Yeah, I think that the reason simply is that if I recall correctly, that we have to, because of state law, we are required of appropriations, we're making a transfer of taxpayer money to an unrelated third party, not an employee, not a department, but to and not a contractor in the sense of the phone company or something, that we are obliged to let the voters vote on it. So there's no easy way to get that off the warrant and put it in the budget unless we had a specific, like contractual, like work for hire kind of relationship with these organizations, and we don't. In other words, they're like nonprofits. We're, in essence, making a donation to them channeled through the town, and that's why we have to vote on it. Chief, correct me if I'm wrong.
I will say that we're one of the few agencies that do it this way, or a few towns. Several of the towns do have it as a line item in the budget. I'm not sure if it's community outreach that they're putting it in, but we're one of the minorities at this point that's doing it this way. This is something I've wanted to put in the budget for a few years. I know that I've talked to a handful of the people those services, and they try to send people to different towns. I try to speak for them here because we use them, but they have to fight for their budgets and for their money every year because a lot of them are federally funded, state funded. They're not receiving federal funds, or that's been cut. I can speak to there's a few towns I know have cut the funding for this year, so that offsets, but they still give those towns the services. But eventually it'd be great if we could, and I will work on trying to get the verbiage and try to find the language that we need to put this in so it's on. You know, some of these haven't gone up in years, so some of these really should be going up, but they're volunteer. They have a lot of people that volunteer. This is just help their operating, and I think some of them do it on the amount that they come up with is based upon how many calls that we give them from a previous year. So I think that's where they're getting that from. But those numbers probably should be going up eventually and should probably be in, you know, some type of line item in the budget.
Thank you. Other questions or comments regarding the Article 9? Seeing there are none, Article 9 will go on the ballot as it is. Do we have a motion to?
Mr. Moderator, make motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 9.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Article 10, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate as proposed by the Recreation Commission the sum of $4,500 for recreational programs and trips for Newton senior citizens. If this article is approved by the voters, the Select Board shall include funding for this program in the Select Board's proposed operating budgets for subsequent years until such time as the town meeting votes otherwise. This article would result in an estimated 0.007 or about a penny's increase per $1,000 of assessed value to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend the article unanimously. Do we have any comments, questions, or discussion?
We have one on Zoom. We have Roger Hamel on Zoom when you're ready.
Why don't we start with
When you're ready.
Jamie, and then we'll take the one from Zoom.
Yeah, I'll make the same comment I make every year on this one, that the seniors, you know, they pay the full boat of taxes, both town and school, and they're not utilizing the schools. They're here, in our community, participating in the community, paying their full boat, and they're not getting the full use as everybody that has kids in schools get. So this is something that we ought to be very happy to support.
Thank you. Ms. Moore, from Zoom.
Okay, Mr. Hamel, go ahead.
Yeah, hello, I'm Roger Hamill. I did some research on this. We have been approving this warrant article since 2009. In 2009, we approved $5,000. Since 2009, costs have gone up a lot. The senior population of Newton has gone up a lot. I think that I request that someone in the room offer an amendment to increase the $4,500 to $5,000.
Thank you, Roger.
In accordance with Roger's request, I'd like to make a motion to increase this number by $1,000 to $5,000.
I'll second it.
And I think, I know what you're trying to say, but I think you slightly misspoke, because the increase is not, it's not a $1,000 increase. It's, you want an increase to 5,000? That's, what you actually said was to increase it by 1,000 up to 5,000, but what you meant to say
What I meant to say was what Roger had said. We need to make it 5,000.
Right, that's what I thought you were trying to say. I just wanted to make sure, because we're trying to transcribe it. I was like, which one of those is it?
I'd have gone with whatever Mary Jo had written down.
Sorry. So the amendment would be to change the amount from $4,500 to $5,000. Do we have a second?
We did, Dan.
Discussion, comments, questions on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so, any opposed? The ayes have it. So this Article 10 has been amended, so it would be the sum of $5,000 instead of $4,500.
And do they still agree?
Yeah, obviously that probably shifts the .007 to .007 and a half or something, but it's not gonna change that. How about the board? We still on board with this? Selectmen?
Any members want to change their vote? No? No? Okay, we're good.
Okay, no change from the selectmen. Any other discussion on this article? Seeing there is none, Article 10 will go on to the ballot as amended. Mr. Marchand, you've got a motion, I'll bet?
Motion to restrict reconsideration
Second.
of Article 10.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I didn't hear any nays. Okay, Article 11, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, as proposed by the Recreation Commission, the sum of $25,920 for the purpose of hiring 4 part-time lifeguards and 1 part-time lifeguard supervisor, performing candidate searches and training, and purchasing the necessary safety equipment. The lifeguards will oversee the safety of all swimmers at the town beach between May 2023 and September 2023. This article would result in an estimated 0.0404 cents increase per $1,000 of assessed value by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend the article. Who would like to speak to it?
I'll speak to it unless Rick or Pat want to jump in, but, you know, this is probably the 4th or 5th time we've had it on the warrant. We made the decision as a rec commission to recommend it as a warrant article, again, only because this is kind of a niche thing, right? A lot of people in town don't even know where the town beach is, but a lot of people in town really love having the town beach and having lifeguards there. So this is a reflection of basically the accurate money that was spent over there to staff. And tell me if you've heard this one before, it's hard to staff the lifeguards. It's extremely hard to staff the lifeguards, so we're trying to make an attempt to make it more of appealing to, you know, people who want to take on these jobs. Last summer, if you had the lifeguard credentials, you could have worked anywhere, basically. So we're trying to make it more appetizing to people, hopefully local people, to work here, but that's what this one is all about.
Any Comments, questions, discussion? Yes, please.
Patricia Masterson, Newton. So we are competing with every town around here, and even northern Massachusetts and, northern New Hampshire. So where we thought that we could just pay like, I don't know, McDonald's or something, we weren't getting the number of people or applicants, and they were going to the $17 an hour Exeter or Epping or, so what we need, there has to be 2 lifeguards on per day. If one of the lifeguards is sick or has an appointment, then we have to close the lifeguard situation at the beach. And I'd just like to point out, a lot of people say, well, just put a sign up, no lifeguard on duty. If someone drowns in that roped area, the town is still liable, whether there's a sign there or not. If someone says they didn't see the sign or, so, the Recreation Commission really believes in this whole safety for the summer at the town beach. So we're hoping that everybody gets on board and backs us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions, Mr. Guy?
So I'm pretty sure that New Hampshire is still a no means no town or state. So I don't think it's going to get voted down. But if it did get voted down, that would mean no lifeguards, correct?
Correct, and that happened about 3 or 4 years ago.
So that's, again, back to, this should be in the budget. As far as I'm concerned, I understand what the goal was, is separating it that way, because I get that part.
Yep.
But that's my concern, is that the no means no stuff. And I know all about lifeguards. My daughter's a lifeguard, so like they're paying.
Does she need a job this summer? I'm serious.
But I get that, but water country's $20 an hour.
Exactly.
And it's tough. It's difficult. But that's I really would like to see. There is a couple of these that should be in the budget, and I understand separating them out makes your budget look better, and then it's a warrant article and stuff like that. But something like this, if it gets voted down, now there's no lifeguards, and you probably have to take the rope down, and then you won't be liable anymore and just swim at your own risk. But that's just a caution about that.
Yeah, and the other thought was that if we do go to a default, we won't have lifeguards either. So if we were to go to a default, but this one passed, which it's been successful the last few years, then we will have lifeguards. So what you're talking about is absolutely valid. We discussed this many meetings. Yeah, so.
Any other comments, questions, discussions, or amendment regarding Article 11? Seeing there are none, Article 11 will go on the ballot as presented. Mr. Marchand, you got a motion for me?
Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article number 11.
Second.
All in favor of the motion to?
Aye.
Aye. I would just like to add that putting out there in layman's terms, like the chairman talked about, so people have to remember the difference between the budget and then the default. So when these things do get put in, right, yearly, like we've been talking about, these pay raises and all of that, they can't go into the default budget. So whatever money is set in that default budget is what money the town has to be able to deal with and pay. So that said situation of trying to hire these lifeguards, which at the cost of more money, or anything else in town, if the default budget goes in, we don't have that money. And thus, that is the reason why, like the chairman said, that these go out as warrants is kind of, it's like, half dozen of these and 6 of those, to where hopefully at least one or the other will pass so that we can do these things without having our backs against the wall. So, just so that everybody's aware of that.
Thank you. So, on to Article 12. to see if the town will vote as proposed by the Board of Selectmen to raise and appropriate the sum of $60,000 to be paid towards the 2023 solid waste disposal budget as an offset to the recycling and disposal costs, and to authorize the withdrawal of $60,000 from the Transfer Station Recycling Special Revenue Fund created in 2003 for this purpose. This article would result in no increase in the amount to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend this article. Does anyone want to speak to that? Any questions on that article?
I would just say, we've seen this one before, right? So again, this is, zero tax increase, we're dipping into the fund, but this is, I think most people, this one typically passes extremely successfully. People understand what we're trying to do, so.
Correct. Any other further questions, comments, or discussion or amendments? Seeing there are none, Article 12 will go on the ballot as presented. Mr. Marchand.
Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 12.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes carry. No reconsideration on that article. Article 13, to see if the town will vote as proposed by the Board of Selectmen to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 for the purpose of holding a hazardous waste day for Newton residents only, said monies to come from the Transfer Station Recycling Special Revenue Fund created in 2003, with no monies to come from taxation. This article would result in no increase in the amount to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend this article 4-0. Mr. Burrow, do you want to comment on that?
Hazardous Waste Day is extremely popular. So we do it every other year currently, right? So,
Currently, yes.
and the sooner we get this approved, then we can schedule a company and a day to do it. So the lines are always very long and all that good stuff. So hopefully people will support this one as well.
Any other questions, comments, or discussion on this Article 13? Seeing there is none, Article 13, yes, sir.
Just for my own sake, for this one as well as the previous one, if this day comes under budget, do those funds get put back into the account?
Correct. And do you recall the last one, Diane? I know it's off the top of your head.
It was very close to $30,000.
Yeah, it's and it's hard to find.
Yes,
the
if we can
vendors
even
these
find
days,
anybody.
yeah. We ended up doing it like very late in the year, I think,
Yes.
last
Yep.
time, because we couldn't find somebody. But that's correct. Any of this stuff, it would go back.
And the reason why is because we have to wait till March
Yeah,
to make sure
right.
it's approved before we
Right.
can even schedule anything.
Right.
Any other questions, discussion, amendments to Article 13? Seeing there are none, Article 13 will go on the ballot as presented.
Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article number 13.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Ayes carry. I can tell it's going to be unanimous. Article 14, to see if the town will vote to adopt an ordinance defining and regulating conflicts of interest for local officers and employees, whether elected or appointed, per the provisions of RSA 31:39A, said ordinance being titled the Town of Newton Ethics Standards. A copy of the Town of Newton Ethics Standards is available at the Town Hall offices. Majority vote required. And I guess I'm asking, why does it, do we know what? Do we know why it says majority vote required? That would be true for every?
Yeah, I have a suspicion that it's in the statute.
Okay, fine, that's fine, that's fine.
Not that it's required language, but it carries over.
That's fine, that's fine. Okay, so the parenthetical majority vote required is part of the text of it. Board of Selectmen does recommend this article unanimously. Questions, comments, discussion. Mr. Kozak.
So I'll just, before we do that, if you don't mind,
Just talk for a second.
Go ahead.
well, I just want to talk about the history of it. So we have our original one, or not original, but the last Code of Ethics policy was approved 25 years ago. 1998, discussions with our town council was that we should take a look at updating that. So we met with town council. He took a look at this, recommended some updates to be more in line with current statutes, current language, and all that good stuff. And that's how we got here. So, okay.
Well, I guess the questions I have is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a copy of what's in Bow, New Hampshire. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
It's not
so
correct.
Bow, New Hampshire was given from the office as an example of what our lawyers did for them, but the intention was to update our own policy.
Okay.
But there were similarities with Bow because it was, there's no pride of authorship.
So there's no comparison. Well, the way that I'm looking at it, and I thought it came from the town of Bow, was that, Bow's twice the size that we are. They have a full-time highway department, police department, fire department, and I can see what a lot of restrictions are. God bless her, Mary Allen, but by reading this stuff, and I don't know how many people are going to read it before they vote, that there's going to be a lot of restrictions to what people can do in town. I mean, a lot of restrictions. And I'll get to the one that I'm really concerned about a little later on. But, I just have a couple of questions because at our last, I'm chairman of the Board of Adjustments, and people don't know who I am, and I also work at the transfer station as the assistant manager. This was concerning us at the last meeting we had, which was last week. Property interest. Ownership of land within 200 feet of any land subject to the members' vote, influence, or actions in the service of the town. We read that as if you're in a butter and you recuse yourself, which our members do, if you go in the audience to speak as a resident, you can't. Somebody could interpret that for me? That's what we got out of our discussion the other night.
Yeah, I don't read that one that way. I read it as the recusal that everybody does anyway.
Yeah.
200 feet, I mean, I don't know if you guys got that from a statute or that could be changed by, the legislative body.
Mr. Hilton, could you just use the mic? Remember, we got people that are remote
ahead.
to us who can't hear you if you're not.
They're
Just
on cable.
Come on, use the mic for a sec.
Getting to the 200 feet thing, I see that in a lot of municipal ordinances, and it's to avoid the situation where somebody's not a direct abutter, but they either like the project or don't like the project. It's clearly going to affect them, so they draw that line and say it's not purely just the abutters. People who will have a pecuniary interest in whatever is in front of them. Okay.
But Attorney Hilson, just to answer Jack's
my
first
other comment
question.
is, when we were reading it over the other night, and everybody was reading a different interpretation, we kind of had to go through this, that they felt that the way it's worded, it would, if someone recuses themselves, which they do it on our board members, and they turn around and want to sit in the audience as a resident, they will not be able to speak. Is that?
I do not read that. So you recuse yourself from the board, the tribunal, whatever it is. You go out here with
You're a
us.
resident.
You can still, I mean, you still have a First Amendment right to speak on whatever.
I can't remember who interpreted that way, but we had a discussion on several areas. Okay.
You can't vote on it. But you,
Right, that is correct, right, okay. Now, on section E, let me just get out the, where is it here? I marked it up. I had to remark all my stuff because the one that I had was completely changed, at least where everything was rated. Let me just get this, I'm sorry about that. Let me see if I can find it here. Where did I put it? There was something in reference to, it looked like that people could not hold signs up down the transfer station, their own, if they were running for a public office. It says on any public land to influence a vote. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't think anybody posts signs at the transfer station.
Not posting, but holding a sign.
Right, hold signs. I don't read it as that way.
I'm sorry, I missed that question.
Well, I'm sorry, I couldn't find it.
Let me field the question a little bit, and then I am going to ask people to speak to the mic so the people remote can hear us. Mr. Kozak raised a point of that the new conflict ordinance describes and prohibits the use of town property for political purposes by anyone who is an elected or appointed official. And the question then is, can people stand at the transfer station?
Or any public piece of property.
Or any public piece of property. And I'll answer that for a second as not the moderator, but as a member of the community. Members of the community can campaign at the transfer station based on a consent decree that the town entered into in a lawsuit brought by myself as moderator at the time, where they had an ordinance which attempted to prevent campaigning at the transfer station. So that consent decree entered into with Rockingham Superior obviously is not affected by this particular act. I would suggest that in other places, and Mr. Hilson might want to weigh in on this, I would suggest in other places in the community that individuals have a right for political purposes to hold signs and do other activities like that, subject to the regulations at things like electioneering zones and so forth. There's no way that the conflict ordinance bans a selectman or another elected official in town from, holding a sign on the street and saying, hey, I want to get elected. That's clearly not something that could possibly be within the scope of that ordinance.
Let me just hang on. I want to read this out loud here. When I knowingly use town property or labor to influence the political cause of any candidate for public office or any political party. That tells me they cannot stand at the transfer station anymore.
Yeah, I think the intent would be, right, that I can't use my town email, I can't use my town computer, I can't use the side of a
But it says,
plow.
it's not what it says,
Well,
man.
let me finish, Jack. So I guess I would ask, and we're talking about 4.1E under section 4, is there a sentence, I'm kind of looking at council, is there a sentence we could add that would specifically call out the transfer station as an allowable?
I mean, certainly.
Use the mic.
Yeah. Certainly, and I think it's a good point you bring, but implicit to this 4.1E, I think knowingly use town property or labor, it's knowingly use in the person's official capacity. So I think it probably would be a problem if someone is being paid by the town and also electioneering wherever they're electioneering. That might be a problem, but I think implicit in this subsection E is while acting in their official capacity. If you look at a prior, like 4.1A, in his or her official capacity, doing something. And so I concede to you, 4.1E doesn't have that qualifier. I would submit it's implied. I mean,
So
constitutional rights clearly will trump, a code of ethics. I mean, that's just how our system works. It's preempted. So you're going to have a constitutional right to have your voice heard. This can't co-opt that constitutional right. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but that's the opinion that I have.
because, knowingly use, so section E, you could write knowingly use in their official capacity, town property or labor.
Can I make a friendly suggestion?
Yeah.
Is there any reason not to move in his or her official capacity into the sentence that starts it off? It is in violation of this chapter for any member to, ends with a colon, just to move in or her up
Yeah,
into
'cause
that.
then it would
It
cover.
qualifies all.
All
Exactly.
them below it?
Yeah.
Somebody thought about that?
I think that's.
I'm going to make that
Why don't
motion.
you guys make that happen?
I'm going to
I'll
make that
second it.
motion before we forget about it.
But now I think this is the selectman document, right?
Correct, yeah.
So that amend-
Proposed selectmen,
But then you need to amend that here, because
as a selectmen's meeting?
I think so.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
would,
on the warrant.
no, I would agree with that.
Okay, so, sorry for the sidebar. I was just talking with Chairman Burrow about procedurally, that amendment to the Code of Ethics itself really needs to get done by the selectmen. And then, I think they are having a meeting here, so if we, Mr. Cozen, would you like to hold for a minute and
Sure,
let them
go
do
ahead.
that?
before we forget it all.
Let's just go do that. You
So
guys do that.
I'm going to make that motion. Who's taking minutes for this? Is this Diane? Diane. So
So what
Diane, you
is
have
your
the-
motion, though?
So the motion is in section 4, section 4.1, the first sentence, ethical violations, period. It is in violation of this chapter for any member in their official capacity to. So my motion is to add the phrase "in their official capacity." And Bob,
Second.
you're still a second. So
Who
with
was
the board, Bob?
Mr. Marchand.
So for the Board of Selectmen, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Charlie's opposed. Okay.
Charlie's opposed?
Charlie's opposed, 3-1.
I mean, I could probably go on here for the next hour, but I'm sure nobody wants me to, but may I suggest that the residents of the town, before they vote on this, and I'm gonna let you know why I'm really concerned about it, and why I'm concerned for the dump, the transfer station, because I work there also. Incompatible employment, this to me is disastrous for the town, okay? Because of our limited, I'm on the Board of Appeals. I've been on the Board of Appeals for over 20 years. We've always had trouble getting volunteers. This year I was fortunate enough to get a couple of people come forward. We still need some more people. The planning board might be the same thing. There just doesn't see enough people to get involved with town. But this really bothers me. In addition to the restrictions set forth in the New Hampshire incompatibility of office statute, and this was 699-7. Did anybody read 699-7?
Yeah, that was
Didn't
a typo.
exist.
Yeah, it was a typo.
Yeah, it was a typo, but
It's been fixed now.
But anybody that had it and brought it home from the meeting, I just happened to find it by accident because I went to see Diane because I kept on trying to read it and I said, God, I even asked Mr. Melvin to look me up, but he was in Concord. And finally I got it squared away. But anyway, let me finish reading this. In addition to the restrictions set forth in New Hampshire incompatibility of office statute, RSA 669:7, it shall be a violation of this chapter for a selectman to simultaneously be employed by the town in any capacity, whether part-time or full-time employment. Well, let's just tell you what happened at the transfer station in the last several months. We can't find any employees. Nobody wants to work. And I talked to Mr. Melvin about it, and he offered his time. I think the town reimbursed for taking the course. You just can't work at the transfer station. It's against the law unless you're certified. And every one of us has to do a minimum of 3 to 6 hours of education every year just to stay there and work. Well, Mr. Melvin was good enough to take the course, getting an 85 or 90 on the exam. It qualified him to work at the transfer station. And thank God for Mr. Melvin in the last 3 or 4 months, but he's been able to keep the transfer station open. And if this passes, I'm going to let the people know that this coming summer and so forth, with vacations and sick leave, the dump will be closed. And so it's your option. Read the thing carefully. I think that should be strict from this and eliminated. I mean, we have a small enough town. I don't know any selectmen that want a full-time job afterwards, for the town. There's just not that many jobs around. But I'd like to make a motion, if it's okay, Mr. Chair, to eliminate, where the heck is it? So I'm doing with 2 different pieces of paper. Sorry for the delay here. Where the heck is it? From prohibitive conduct, and it's incompatible employment. I would like to eliminate that from this warrant article for the Code of Ethics for 2023.
So, the policy is not per se part of the warrant article.
Yeah.
So that's more like a request to the selectmen who are now sitting in meeting to think about that and make their choice what they want to do. Since you're also having a selectmen's meeting, we'll all patiently wait while you guys figure that out.
So in other words, Jack has proposed that one of us make that motion.
Pardon me?
You're proposing that one of us
make that motion, eliminate that part
Yeah,
from
so
our...
does anybody want to make that motion? Okay, I'll tell you the reason why I wouldn't make that motion is because if, as you read this, the Board of Selectmen becomes the conflict of interest committee for the town. So
I agree with
I
that.
don't believe that the Board of Selectmen should start with a conflict of interest. I will tell you, you talked about history there. You know, Charlie should be commended because he went out of his way
Yes,
to step up
definitely, yeah.
as a temporary solution. Because we have staffing issues. We've been talking about it all morning. To me, it's a temporary solution. The permanent solution is going to be able to hire somebody. I know it's tough to get the resumes, as we talked about earlier. I would go back to warrant Article 2. If we have the proposed budget, we're going to have more flexibility to perhaps raise the hourly wage over there, hopefully get more applicants and correct that issue that we have over there. Obviously, you know, what it goes back to is I believe that we should not have a conflict of interest on the Conflict of Interest Committee. I believe there's already statutes about the full-time employment thing. I think that goes in line with the full-time employment. But I think part-time employment, it just doesn't work. I've been on the board for a while, and that's why I wouldn't make that motion. The rest of the board can obviously speak.
I guess it's dead in the water. I'll leave it up to the residents. Please make sure that your residents go to the town hall, get a copy of it and read it and see what the effects will be. Thank you.
And I would agree with that, and it's online too, so anybody can download it.
I just want to add to Selectman Burrow, I don't know if my mic's on. If you, as a selectman, I go out and I get certified as a police officer, because I've had this discussion, and I go to work for the department head, and then at night I'm his boss, and because he reprimanded me, I don't like something. There's a conflict of interest. That conflict is real, whether it's the transfer station, the police station, or the fire department, or even as the town road agent. If I went to work for him and I decided that I didn't like something, that's a personal conflict that you bring to work at night. That does not belong in this town or any town, and that's why I will not bring that up. Sorry, Jamie.
I just have some procedural questions.
Sure.
So I think I just saw the Board of Selectmen said they don't want to do that.
Right.
But the legislative body's here. Can't the legislative body put a motion to change that?
Complicated question. I think what we can do, I'll take a crack at it first. Mr. Hilson, if I'm wrong, I'd like to hear your opinion. What we can do is not edit that document per se, but we can put whatever circumstances we want into, we can amend Article 14 as long as it's on the topic. So Article 14, hypothetically, could include text which has the effect of editing that other document. You know, we could say that we will, I'm giving a hypothetical here only,
Yep.
but we as a, and we, I'm saying the voters, could redraft 14, please don't do this because we won't be able to afford the ballots, to say it will include the actual text, right, from this, put all that text in there today, have Mary Jo feign on us because it's crazy, and quit, and then edit it to our heart's content. We could also say that to see if the town will vote to do this and strike paragraph such and such of, I mean.
Okay, but you can do that.
Sure.
So
I don't see why not.
That's why I wanted to let, you said it's a dead issue. If you don't want it to be a dead issue, you can make a motion to do that.
You also,
Right, but you got to figure out the wording in such a way that it.
Mr.
I think
Moderator,
I'm
you
gonna,
also
I
have a
think
hand up.
because
I think I have.
I read it over several times, and I hope other people did in town. And
Roger Ham.
my motion's gonna be to, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to make a motion, this is to the voting public out there, to remove item 14 from this year's warrant article.
Second.
Okay. Removal is not an option in front of voters.
It is not.
It is certainly possible for the body here to amend it in many, many ways. and I will say the things you can't do, and then you have a very broad range of what you can do. And I have no particular preference for what the vote will do. You cannot just amend it to the two words, 2C with a period. Right? That's already failed in the court case from another town tried that. You can say to see if the town will study this, consider it, have the selectmen work on it more, anything else relating to the topic at hand of, they could postpone the adoption, they could, I mean, there's a huge variety. I'm not, I don't have a position one way or another.
Thank you.
But I think you can recognize there are many ways an article could be amended to have the effect of the voters here, what they desire. But you can't just strike it in its entirety. I get that's.
Okay. Let me come up with some wording. I would ask Bob to hold back as far as bringing it back up again. I'd like to sit down and come up with a comment. Thank you.
That's fine.
Hopefully before the
Road
end
agent,
of the...
yes, sir. Mr. Pavero. Oh, hang on one second. Mr. Hilson. Yeah, can we take Mr. Hilson first? Because I think he wants to weigh in on the procedural question of editing and range of editing.
I've got two things associated with this warrant article, okay? One has to do with the vote that the select board just took, which was prudent. I think that's a prudent redraft. I would ask you to look at 4.1H, okay? And very generally, 4.1H prohibits people from taking gifts and money because they get close to being bribes. We modified the preamble to 4.1 to say this applies basically in your official capacity. That makes no sense. Are you going to accept a gift in your non-official capacity and it's not going to disqualify you? So I would submit that keep the change that you just made, but with respect to subsection H, just put knowingly accept a gift in any capacity with a value in excess of blah, 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 blah. Because you don't want people skirting the rules by saying, well, that was a gift in my unofficial capacity. That would defeat the purpose of that. And then I would also submit, if the gentleman is concerned about part-time employees at the dump, maybe you can modify warrant article 14 merely to say accepting that it will not apply to the transfer station or something like that, because I think the provision of the ethics code that he's concerned about, it's an extraordinarily important provision, as you ably articulated. And so if there's a particular governmental service here in town, sounds like the transfer station, and you're stepping up, sir, maybe you want to kind of amend that warrant article to accept that from this.
Well, it's not the amending of the warrant article you're speaking of. You're amending the policy.
No, I know, but I'm wondering if you can't amend the warrant article to say something like an exempting part-time employees from the dump from same, or something like that, because that is a crucial portion of that ethics code. You're going to want to keep. The town is going to want to keep. But if it sounds like there's a particularized issue that I understand, maybe we can play with the warrant article to try to deal with that. So that's my only suggestion.
Thank you.
Mr. Pavero, are you okay with Mr. Silvio going first?
Can I just make a recommended motion of maybe adding verbiage to the effect of it's acceptable if it allows a public facility to remain open by having said employee employed? Because that would be in extenuating circumstances where we would have to close the dump because we didn't have personnel. So that would be under exceptions, maybe?
Possibly. Mr. Pavero.
Mike Pavero, road agent. First, I think if we have any weak spots in our ethical policies here in town, they should be addressed. I'm a little confused how it hit a warrant article, which is a separate thing, because we do policies and procedures on a regular basis, and why this couldn't be addressed as a selectman or a board doing an ethical review of the policy we have in place. That being said, I need some clarification on, and I'm being selfish, the highway department. Depending on how you read this It's interpretive. They all are. Any legal document is interpretive. If you read this, it can be implied that I'm an elected official in the town. I don't have any salary. I don't get paid any salary. My compensation is, and it's been this way forever, I didn't start it, road agents going back 40, 50, 60 years are the same. The compensation is the rental of the town, my equipment to the town. I interpret that, and I've had a couple conversations, but in full disclosure, here at town meeting and everybody else to hear it, that to me seems to be a conflict. Now, I disclose everything, but my fear is if a board changes, and I'm still road agent here, and the board swaps people, and this would be unlikely, but a board member or somebody or a board doesn't like me, then the interpretation of this may change. And when it changes, they may have the right to say, you are being compensated for your equipment. That's a violation of this ethics code.
Yep.
Okay? I'm not sure of any individual on the planet that wants to do my job for no money. The town has an option. You can buy all your own equipment and hire a full-time road agent. Plan on coming up with your annually budget of highway at somewhere around $800,000 or $900,000, not the 4 it's at now. But I just want clarification on that. I know if town council can clarify it, but somebody clarify to me how that definitely won't change the operation of the highway department.
Yeah, I think it looks like he's reading it just to answer your question, so.
Yeah.
While he's working on that, Chief, you want to speak to us from your point of view?
Good afternoon. Just to touch quick on what Jack stated. I don't think there's a department head in the town of Newton, other than myself, that have had 2 selectmen who are my boss, and when the bell rings, I'm their boss. 2. When I became chief in 14, I inherited one, and 3 years ago, I believe it's 3 years, because Mike is filling the position right now, I inherited another one. I can tell you it has its goods and it has its bads, okay? So if we're gonna try to mix and match here, if the board, there's some way that the department head can say, or maybe it's the Board of Selectmen or legal counsel, town administrator, on the fire department side, if you're a selectman and you decide you want to be a call member, even though we're desperately in need of a call member, wait till the next chief takes office. Or give me the authority to put somebody on leave like I did the last time. I was lucky that selectman did not fight me. Okay? I'll be honest with you, it is a dangerous slope when you allow a Board of Selectmen. I know Charlie's saved the transfer station. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. I can tell you from my point, I've almost walked out many times, and some of the senior board members know what I'm talking about. It is extremely difficult to have a selectman as your boss.
Fully agree.
Mr. Moderator. I think Roger's still.
I got my own thoughts.
Mr. Hamill's got his hand up, actually. I'll let him go. 'Cause
Thank you very much.
He's been a while.
Roger's arm is probably getting stiff. Can you connect that, Mr. Hamill, and let him add in his comments or questions?
Hey, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One, I have a procedural question. If this were to get approved, who can amend it? And how does it get amended?
The Board of Selectmen's policy, so the board would amend it.
But it says it's an ordinance. It doesn't say it's a policy. And if they can amend it, why don't they just amend the 19, whatever it is, 98 ordinance that already exists to amend it either in whole or in part, rather than having a warrant article.
Right, I can tell you from where I sit, if you look, the 1998 policy was done just this way, right? And it is my belief, if we're gonna make kind of little changes here and there, it's something we could do on a Tuesday night with a Board of Selectmen's meeting. But I think something like this needs the power of the legislative body to get behind it. And my thing is, and you know, Jack kind of said it, is let the people decide, right? Because you could look in this room, the vast majority of people in this room are tied to the town somehow. So they look at things a certain way. But there is a whole population of people out there who might think differently. So if we give them the opportunity on March 14th to vote on this, then we know our answer. This could die on March 14th. We have our answer. We're sticking with the 98 policy. Otherwise, if they vote in favor, the majority votes in favor of this, we know how we're going to move forward. And most of us, I'll tell you, we could do a show of hands. We have policies like this where we work. We've had them for ages. And I can't think of an example where I've worked where you maintain the top of the you maintain a position at the top of the org chart, yet you also have a position with an entire reporting structure between you and the top where you actually work here, where you get an employee review from people who actually report to you. And I think I speak for a lot of people in town when I say I don't know of other examples like that. I think this moves the town forward, but it's just my opinion.
I'm going to take the extraordinary step as a moderator of commenting and answering Mr. Hamill's question. So I'm going to beg the indulgence of the people here. The reason it's an ordinance that needs a town vote as opposed to a policy is the new document, the new interest ordinance, purports to require compliance by other people who are not employees, not town employees, not under the purview of the selectmen, and are in fact independently elected officials or appointed officials. So the provisions of this apply wholly to myself, to the town clerk, to Mr. Kozak, to the road agent who's elected, to the supervisors of the checklist, to the ballot clerks who are not appointed by political parties but who are appointed by the town process, and everybody else on the planning board and every other organization. That means that this is an ordinance binding us that is applied like a law, and that's why it needs to be voted on by the voters. And I think all the voters need to be thoroughly aware of the requirements it has. And if I may, with the indulgence of the voters here from an informational point of view, point out it requires a significant public disclosure of your personal and family finances. If this were to be adopted, every single person who serves in an appointed role or an elected role, and that includes our supervisors of the checklist, our ballot clerks, people that are working, I'm looking around the room, the people that work at elections, all of them will be required to file a public statement of every source of income exceeding $10,000, including your retirement income, where it comes from, and that applies to your family members as well as yourself. So I think you can ask yourself, how many people in this room who serve on those kind of things are ready to file that document with the clerk's office when anybody who wants come in and get it and have a look-see? So,
98 policy requires a lot of that.
Well, it may, but I'm just suggesting that everyone should take a very careful and close look at this, and to the extent that that kind of factor is relevant, that's why it's an ordinance for Mr. Hamill's question, not a policy, because it's not a policy, it's an ordinance. Mr. Simone.
But to Mr. Barrow's point, no, the 98 policy does not require financial disclosure. And that's why you haven't had to fill one out. I have a really minor editorial question. Section 6 6.1 on procedures for inquiries and alleged violations. The first line, any resident of Newton. So if you're not a resident of Newton, you can't file a complaint?
Give me an example.
Well, no, I think you asked the question.
Well, right, I know, but give me an example.
A developer who is not who owns property in Newton, but who is not a resident of Newton.
Right. We get complaints from all sorts of people.
Yeah, but this says that only a resident of Newton can.
Against this policy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We get complaints all the time from that don't necessarily fall in line with the policy. So if there were, to use your example, that person could still complain about whatever to the Board of Selectmen. We could choose to follow the complaint policy or follow this policy, is how I would read that.
It doesn't say only, it says any.
My final question is I would request that the attorney go through and discuss what is the difference between the 98 policy and this policy.
That would take it.
I'm not prepared to do that.
Mr. Hamel, that would be a very interesting exercise, but
But that's what you're asking the people to vote on.
Yeah, I can tell you that we've requested, and I believe it's ready for the voter's guide to have that attached as part of the voter's guide, so people will be able to read the differences between both policies through the voter's guide.
So thank you, Mr. Hamel. I think I have, Mr. Guide, are you sort of pending? Jamie?
So an interesting discussion. And we've lived with the ethics policy that we have now for 25 years, and the world didn't blow up. We do have some situations that are not optimal. Certainly, it's not good, to use the example that everybody keeps on using, to have Charlie be a boss and a subordinate at the same time, depending on what seat he's in. That's not a good thing. I don't think anybody would say, that's what we want to do, a white paper, let's design it this way. Nobody would say that. The reality is, though, with what has been brought up and discussed here, if in fact this means everybody has to file financial things, you think you have staffing problems now, you'll have nobody run for anything ever. Frankly, it's none of your damn business what people make.
Yep.
So that would kill all of that. We don't have a solution for the transfer station. So we passed this, and with a 19.8% increase in their budget, I would say odds are not good that the budget's going to pass. So there won't be the money to be able to do something about the pay. So we pass something that then shuts down the transfer station because we're in a non-optimal situation. Well, that's fine, it's non-optimal, but the transfer station's open. So I don't think you replace non-optimal with, well, let's just shut it down with no solutions. And every year you see Mary Jo go on Facebook and say, nobody's signing up for anything now. Can you please come and volunteer to help your community? You put these types of constraints on people, gig is up. You let people resigning, they're simply going to say, it is not your business what I make or where I get my money from. So I just think that one of the things that you said is a possibility for an amendment, and if Mr. Kozak would allow, I'd like to make an amendment that says we change this article to say that the voters are instructing the board to go back and review and revise the 1998 ethics policy to come up with something that allows a town of our size with its staffing issues to be able to implement an updated ethics policy without negatively impacting the ability to run the town. And I couldn't repeat that if you asked me to, so.
It's being recorded. The only thing I would ask, and this is maybe Attorney
Hang on
Hilson.
for a second.
Okay, sorry.
That's a
Is
proposed
that a-
amendment?
That was my
Do we have a
proposed
second?
That's a motion, okay.
Second. Okay, I'm not sure we have the text, so,
Yeah, I can work on it.
okay, did you get it? Mary Jo's got it. Okay, so we have the text. Okay,
Point
so
of discussion.
comment and discussion about that proposed amendment. And Mary Jo, let's read back the amendment so we can be sure what we're talking about.
To see if the town will vote to review and revise the 1998 Code of Ethics ordinance.
She got part of it, okay? And I got to see if the town will instruct the selectmen to review that's kind of superfluous words, but to instruct the selectmen to review and revise the 1998 ethics policy to be able to
Update.
to update, right?
To update the ethics policy in such a way as to allow the continued operation of town services.
Okay. Okay, so I think I got it. Mr. Simone, comment on the amendment.
Just really, I'm sorry, just.
Why don't we get a second while we're clear on that?
Yeah.
To hold on for a second. A second on that? Yeah. Got a second. Okay.
I wanted to just try to keep the horse from getting out of the barn here, and, you know, Attorney Hilson can correct me if I'm wrong with this, but the moderator kind of said, and Jamie just backed it up, made it sound like everybody who's an elected official or who works for the town is going to have to disclose all their financial interests. And I may be mistaken as I read this, but the key thing is, if you're doing business with the town, is the way I read it. And also, it talks about a little further about, you know, that purchase policy. In other words, do you have the power to spend money for the town? So I don't see it, and if I see it the wrong way, then, you know, Jamie makes a good point, we can clean it up, right, with your motion. But, you know, the intention is not if I'm going to be, you know, on the ZBA or whatever, and now all of a sudden if I want to be on the ZBA, I have to file all these financial disclosures. I wouldn't want that, right? Because it would do exactly what you're saying. It would have a cooling effect, right? People wouldn't want to do that. I think the concern is if you're on both sides of the negotiation, right? If you're providing a service to the town and you're voting on who gets to provide the service to the town. But that's, are you?
That's accurate.
So that's.
The authority on purchase orders.
So you're saying what I just said is accurate. So the authority to sign purchase orders is the key element I think most people are missing here. But that's all I wanted to add.
Well, let me just hold that right there. But this is the problem with this kind of document, because there's two ways to interpret that sentence, clearly. The first one is, and I'm going to read the whole sentence, in accordance with RSA 3139A, any appointed or elected official, the town administrator, finance director, fire chief, police chief, and any other town employee with authorization to sign purchase orders shall complete a financial interest disclosure form. Well, that suggests that either it means what Mr. Hilson says, which is that any other town employee with authorization to sign purchase orders shall complete a financial interest disclosure form, or it means that the phrase with authorization to sign purchase orders shall complete, et cetera, applies to everything ahead of it in that whole line. And I don't think you can tell which way it is. I mean, you can say you think you know which way it is, but I think you could argue just as well, if you were arguing this, that that second half characterization only applies to any other town employee. Because why enumerate them at all then, right? Why are they all listed out ahead of you? Wouldn't it be better to say any person covered by this ordinance who has authorization to sign purchase orders shall complete a financial interest disclosure, right? As opposed to putting that as kind of a codicil after any other town employee. Because I think the with authorization applies to any other town employee. It's just a limitation on what town employees would be covered, but it clearly covers elected officials, town administrators, finance director, fire chief, et cetera.
Wait,
Right, the warrant article's in front of me, so it's kind of a sidebar, you're right. So my apologies.
It's the warrant article only, so.
Okay, so,
I want to hear your opinion, trust me.
but it doesn't matter.
This warrant article is
Nor does my opinion, my apologies, nor does my opinion of what it means. But anyway, so yeah, we have the warrant article in front of us, we have the amendment in front of us,
And a second.
and we have a second. Comments on that? Mr. Simone, I think you were waiting to actually talk to the topic at hand.
Yes. Knowing the genesis of how this all came about, and over the past couple of weeks when this came out, of all the discussion that's been going on, and in the interest of transparency, I think a lot more work has to be done in this by the Board of Selectmen, not just farming out to say we need a new policy, here it is. I think a lot more thought has to be put into it, and it has to be done in some work sessions, and it has to be done in public. And for that reason, and also for the fact that you are not going to get anybody to read 10 pages of legalese and understand it, I think we need to table this and work on it down the road, take a look at the current document that we do have and modify that document to fit what we want and make sure the public is aware of it, because the way it stands right now, people will not understand what this is all about. And I'm sorry, I understand the intent, and I believe wholeheartedly, yes, we need a code of conduct and we need something in place to protect ourselves. But to do it, and to do it within a 1 month period of time and throw it into everybody, say, here it is, voted all or nothing, I think we're doing a disservice to the town. And I think the selectmen ought to take heed in the fact that they need to do a little more homework before something like this gets brought to the general public. That's my comment.
Thank you.
I would give the voters more credit, Joe.
Mr. Guy.
regardless of what this is, you guys can meet on Tuesday and adjust it how you want. So if you don't want the 5 selectmen to work for the town, which is what I understand, you guys can put that to a vote on Tuesday. If you want all of this to go in, say I'm a business and I'm on the planning board and I do business with the town through my business, now you guys need to know all of my financial stuff? I don't think so. And that goes for a lot of townspeople. Well, maybe a lot of elected officials, but still, that's not gonna work. But like I said, you guys can vote on this on Tuesday. It doesn't need to go in front of everybody.
Mr. Bavero.
I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I think this directly puts me out of business in the town.
Correct.
And I'm not here to hide anything from anybody, but I can stand here and tell you, you're not getting my financial statements from my company. You're not getting them. It's nobody's business. For the town, anything I do for the town, any compensation I have from the town, it's all in the town report anyhow. That's transparent. But you're not getting my financial statements for a company that I've been in business for 40 years. It's not happening. I'm not Donald Trump.
Trish. Ms. McCarthy.
Tricia McCarthy. I'm actually going to piggyback on what Mike Pavero said. Financial interest, those financial statements, when you read that one paragraph that you just read, so conservation, you know, we volunteer our time, we vote in a public conservation meeting to spend some money, I don't know, a pond leveler, beaver retriever, whatever it might be. The conservation chair signs it, she's going to fill out a financial statement, everyone will quit. Recreation, same thing. They vote on things in a public meeting. They may sign purchase orders or requisitions, but it doesn't get approved until it comes very transparently in front of the selectmen in a publicly posted meeting. So I don't understand the reason to fill out a financial statement when alone, if I sign something, the police chief, the fire chief, the road agent, it doesn't get approved until it comes before our governing body. I would have a huge problem with our committees and boards that for the most part are all volunteers to say, yeah, but if you're going to sign, if you're the chair and you're going to sign a financial statement, they're all going to quit.
Okay. On the amendment, any further comments? So the amendment, let's make sure we're very clear what the amendment would be. The amendment would change the article to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, to see if the town will vote to instruct the selectmen to review and revise the 1998 ethics policy to update the ethics policy in such a way as to allow the continued operation of town services.
If the town just votes no on this warrant article, does it not basically go back to the selectmen to redo it anyways?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
You sure about that, though? Because that would be a no means no, I would think, and that means at least for a year, we wouldn't update the policy. The way it was just read, that's how I would.
You wouldn't update the policy as an ordinance, but you could update the 1990.
No, that's, not if this amendment passes, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but so Jamie's motion, the new, would be the new warrant article, instructs us to update the 98 policy. If it fails, then that would be telling us not to update the 98 policy for 1 year, essentially.
Semantics, though, we can just make a new policy.
It's not what the voters said, though, yeah.
Right, so.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Hilson would like to throw a comment in on that. You want to come up to the mic and comment on that?
Just to get to your comment, the reason the townsfolk are, this is in front of the townsfolk, is because the statute requires that the ordinance be approved by the voter, by the legislative body, not the select board. And so I suppose, you know, if you pass the warrant as currently being proposed to be amended, you default back to the 98 version, but it can't be updated until next year when the select board proposes perhaps a new approved version here.
One
in
year.
2024.
It's 1 year.
Yeah. So 1 year, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Simone, on the amendment.
I like what the attorney had just mentioned, but I want to make sure that in the amended article, it states that the selectmen have a year to work on the policy, and they will work on the policy during the year. So it's presented in a logical, meaningful fashion for the next legislative body.
Well, I think we've got that because the text says we'll vote to instruct the selectmen. Yeah, I think it's to instruct the selectmen to review and revise it. So I think they better, I mean, they should hopefully respond to that, I would hope. Okay, any other?
Move the question.
Yeah, okay. Move the question is basically what we're about to do anyway. So Mr. Simone, I'll take that as a friendly suggestion because that's what basically we're going to do. Seeing there's no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All opposed to the amendment?
Nay.
The ayes carry. So we're back to the article as a whole. Do we have any further discussion on the article as a whole? Seeing there is none, Article 14 will go on to the ballot. Oh, sorry, Mr. Melvin, my apologies. You got to yell out, man.
I know. Well, I don't like to. I'd like to make a motion that we put the full text of this on the ballot so that the voters can actually read it and make an honest decision. Because if you look at Article 14...
You can't do that.
Oh, you've just blown my election budget out of the water.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Okay, this policy is 9 pages.
Yeah, you can't do
That's gonna
that.
make a 9-page ballot.
It's actually, because the motion passed, that's not, this is.
Right,
Right.
it's not even mentioned
It's
anymore.
not there anymore.
Go on.
No.
Okay. I don't, Mr. Melvin, I don't think you want to do that. I'll just do it from the, because the
I
ballot's
do
too
want to do it. Because if people look at this, they're going to turn around and they're going to say, oh yeah, no problem. But if they get to read what's in here, they may change their mind.
Yeah, but it's not.
They're not.
It's a moot point now.
Good point.
Yeah, because everybody just voted to have the board revise it. So that's no longer exists, Charlie. Right now, that no longer exists.
If it exists at all, it's a draft, you know?
Yeah.
So I believe we have to do.
Right, I think you need to, you get a re-chance as the board to vote your conscience on that topic, right?
Yep.
So we're gonna, hang on, Ms. Moran.
So, they had made a motion to modify the ethics code, the new one. So does that get scratched out now?
No, that's their meeting activity. Their meeting activity is kind of a separate meeting in parallel.
Doesn't matter now.
So whatever happened there for the selectmen is the selectmen's meeting. It's, you know, they just did what they did.
Just
It's
check
kind of
out.
moot maybe at the moment, but or maybe it's the first step on what they're going to do next. So at this point, again, the selectmen get to make a recommendation, so they have a moment to work that out.
Yeah, so 14 has now been rewritten. Previously, the board recommended this article 4-0. So my question polling the board is, do you still want to recommend the new rewrite of Article 14? Charlie?
I'll go with the new right.
You'll go with the new one. Bob?
Yep.
Mike?
Yep.
I am not, so it'll be 3-1. So
Mr. Moderator, could you read what the new one will be?
I will, with the help of my highly skilled clerk. Okay, it will now read, Article 14 will read, to see if the town will vote to instruct the selectmen to review and revise the 1998 ethics policy, to update the ethics policy in such a way as to allow the continued operation of town services.
Okay.
That's it. And then it will be, of course, the 3-1 vote will be reflected in the next line. Let me guess, I'm about to...
And I'm sorry. Just to explain my no vote, just to be clear, it's because my thinking is we've already done that and we should move forward to the town to approve it, but I understand I'm the one, so we're moving on to 15. So
not quite. I'm
sorry,
I'm
Joe?
listening out loud to see if I have a motion on reconsideration.
Motion to restrict reconsideration
Thank
of
you.
Article
Yeah.
number 14.
Second.
Second. All in favor of the no reconsideration?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, on to Article 15. Shall the town of Newton vote in accordance with RSA 72:27A to readopt the provisions of RSA 72:28(2), known as the optional veterans tax credit, in the amount of $750 per year? If adopted, the following individuals will be eligible for the veterans tax credit. A, every resident of this state who served not less than 90 days on active service in the armed forces of the United States in any qualifying war or armed conflict listed in RSA 72:28(5), and was honorably discharged, or an officer honorably separated from service, or the spouse or surviving spouse of such resident. B, every resident of this state who was terminated from the armed forces because of service-connected disability, or the surviving spouse of such resident. And C, the surviving spouse of any resident who suffered a service-connected death. This tax credit shall replace and shall not be in addition to the standard veterans tax credit, and shall be subtracted in accordance with RSA 72:28(3), and again, it notes a majority vote is required. The Board of Selectmen does recommend this article 4-0. It's my understanding that our town clerk has a minor fix. Very minor fix from, I can probably just go ahead and say it. I believe the first citation, instead of RSA 72:27A, should be to RSA 72:27B.
And that's from DRA.
That's from
right?
DRA, right.
Yeah.
So, any discussion or opposition related to that fix?
It's fixed.
All in favor?
Aye.
Fixed it. Thank you. Okay, on to the article as a whole, and discussion, questions, amendments, and so forth.
I'm going to kind of speak
Yes.
to this. Okay, currently, we have a veterans tax credit of $750 to veterans, homeowners. This law allows to be more inclusive of all the others that they just added, the A, B, C, D, all of those people will now be included in that. Typically, the standard deduction for veterans in the state of New Hampshire is $50 off of their tax bill. We have already adopted the optional veterans tax credit, which gives us the maximum amount of $750. Now they want to include everybody, so we have to re-adopt this. If this does not pass, we lose the $750 deduction we already have. We go back to $50 and would have to start all over again. So we either, everybody vote to include everybody else and it passes, and if it doesn't pass, we go back to the bottom of $50. We lose our optional credit that we already have, is how it was explained to me.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Guy looks like he's got a thought on this.
I'm fine with that, but is there a reason why the board didn't just want to include the all veterans one? The B, 70. It is, no, it's not that. It's 7227B, which is the all veterans tax credit.
We just changed that A to B. It was supposed to say B.
Oh, you just did that?
Yeah, we just
that
did
was the
that.
fix we just
Well,
made.
I was looking at it, it doesn't, it's still saying, I know, right? So then do you have to change the wording where it says that served 90 days in a war or conflict? Because that changes it too.
I don't know, it's not my article.
Yeah, hang on for a second.
Not my article.
I guess Mr. Guy's question, which I'm going to cast my glance over towards the town council, who looks like I think it's coming. Is that set of restrictions, A, B, and C, are they, in other words, should they be there or not? Right? In other words, it looks like, I think the intent was everybody, but I think the question was, this includes surviving spouses, right?
It does.
Right, so the idea here was to increase it to surviving spouses, but as Mr. Guide pointed out, is there a set of veterans who get excluded somehow? Right?
Reading it, there is. You have to serve in a war or conflict, not a case.
Well, I understand. I don't know what the other one is. I'm saying I'm not that familiar with it, so.
Thank you for bringing this up. I think we may have amended proposed Article 15 incorrectly. In other words, we put, instead of RSA 7227A, we just amended it to RSA 7227B. That reference is that was correct. That's just referring to the mechanism by which this credit is adopted. I think what the warrant wanted to do is ensure that you have the optional veterans credit under RSA 72:28 Roman numeral 2 and the all veterans credit under RSA 72:28B. So I think that in other words, we want all the veterans credit.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. So could it be the DRA gave us the wrong?
It's possible because DRA gave us 2 articles.
Well, I mean, they kindly gave you this email like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Spelling this out. So I'm wondering if,
Can I make a procedural suggestion since we're getting to lunchtime? You're here anyway.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to help us solve that problem?
Yeah.
And then we'll leave 15 pending. I'm going to ask the voters to take out of order to leave 15 pending so we can figure out how to fix it properly. And then we can go on and talk about 16 and 17.
Yeah.
Okay? So Mr. Hill's going to work on that and with the divinations of what the DRA is trying to say. Mr. Melvin, yes, on that topic?
Didn't we vote to not bring that back up?
No, we
Not
didn't.
yet.
Not yet, because we weren't done with it
17?
yet. 15, we weren't done with it.
15? We're on 16.
Number on 15.
No, on 15. We haven't done any reconsideration on 15. We haven't finalized it. So.
Have an old warrant.
We were just talking about it. So
I'm pretty sure we did.
I need a vote to take it out of order. Can we just? Thank you. Second. Okay, so we will now take 16 out of order, and then we'll hopefully loop back to 15. Okay, Article 16. To see if the town will vote as proposed by the Board of Selectmen to establish a capital reserve fund under the provision of RSA 35:1 to be known as the Town Cisterns and Fire Ponds Capital Reserve Fund for the purpose of maintaining, repairing, and improving or replacing the town's cisterns and fire ponds. To raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 to be placed in the fund, and to name the Board of Selectmen as agents to expend from such fund, said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance. This article would result in no increase in the amounts to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen did recommend it. We have someone who wants to speak to that.
I don't know if the chief can weigh in a little bit too, but this is one of those I'll call it forgotten things, right? Where the developer builds the cisterns when the development's done and they move on, and now some of these cisterns, 20, 25 years old, we have no budget in place to go take a look to see what the health are of these cisterns. And I hope most people realize, these are vital, right, Chief? Because we're not a big city with a bunch of fire hydrants, and that's what this is all about. But
Right. Just real quick, because we spent a little bit, long time. The town does not have any municipal water. The fire department relies on the cisterns and the dry hydrants. We did some research to past members, town hall, et cetera. Nobody has any idea when the last time any of them were serviced. This warrant article would be the start to possibly hire an engineer to come in and review all the cisterns and dry hydrants in town. On a side note that the chairman just brought up, I know other communities, for the planning board, because I know there's members behind me, they have, when you're building a development, 25 years, 20 years on a cistern. The way Newton is, they put it in the ground, it leaks the next year, it's on the taxpayers.
Any other questions or comments on 16, Article 16? Seeing there are no amendments, Article 16 will go on the ballot as presented. For Article 16, would Mr. Marchand like to make a motion?
Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article number 16.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we have no reconsideration of 16. If it's acceptable to voters, we'll go ahead and work on 17 while our council's working on. We'll go back to 15, ready? Okay, great.
Mary Jo, does the town currently have the all veterans tax credit?
I'm going to say yes. You're asking the wrong person.
I believe.
But I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to know if I should put re-adopt or adopt here, but I think 15, the first sentence should be amended to read, and I know I can't make the motion because I'm not here, shall the town of Newton vote in accordance with RSA 72:27A, okay, to re-adopt the provisions, and here's the insert, of the all veterans tax credit under RSA 72:28-B and of RSA 72:28 and the optional one as well. So you're inserting that all veterans, the reference to that all veterans tax credit into warrant article 15. Okay.
Okay.
The DRA wants them separate. There's no way to separate them out at this juncture.
So that encompasses everything they just said.
It does. It doesn't.
Close enough.
It doesn't observe their requirement that
Right,
or
that's
their
close
suggestion that it's separate, but we can't make them separate now anyway. So.
Right. Okay. I was going to say thank you. Thank you. So the amendment, as Mr. Hilson thankfully put together for us, is shall the town of Newton vote in accordance with RSA 72:27A, which is what the original text says, to re-adopt the provisions of, and then we're adding the phrase, the all veterans tax credit, which is RSA 72:28B, and RSA 72:28(2), Roman numeral 2, right, known as the optional veterans tax credit. And we got it. Okay. That's it. That's all we need to change.
So because he couldn't make the motion, you made the
Well,
motion?
do we need to remove the,
We need everything after that, just pretty much needs to come out.
if adopted, the fall,
Is surplusage, but it references, section 28, and so I don't read that as limiting the all veterans tax credit under 28B.
right, but if it's surplus, may I suggest?
I'd like to amend my amendment to dump the surplus.
Right, got it. So that would, That would, thank you, that would remove that entire block of text that says, if adopted, down through who suffered a service-connected death, that whole section of A, B, and C. Okay, any questions, comments, or discussion on the amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The ayes carry, so,
Who are we scratching out?
okay, one moment.
Who are we scratching out here?
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm guessing that the.
Motion to restrict reconsideration.
That's fine,
Of
thank you.
Article
Second.
number 15.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, I do have to give the selectmen the opportunity to revise their vote, but my guess is the chairman is going to say, we don't need to.
Yeah, I would say, just looking at everybody, we don't need to change our, okay. Good.
Okay. Onwards to Article 17. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $5,130.25 to be deposited into the Skateboard Park Expendable Trust Fund created in 2021. Said funds to come from the unassigned fund balance. The amount of $5,130.25 and the unassigned fund balance represents donations raised by Paul Murray through various events and deposited into the town's general fund, but which are restricted for the purposes for which the fund was created. This proposed article will result in no increase in the amount to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend the article. I'm going to say that DRA didn't like the 25 cents. Hearing no opposition, we're going to remove the 25 cents, put zero like they like. How about any more discussion on this particular warrant?
The only thing I would add is, I've talked about it before, we like those who help themselves, right? So this was money raised by this group for this project. They've been doing this for a couple of years, eventually updating the skateboard park. So this gives us the opportunity to accept that and move it to where we can use it.
Go ahead.
My only, Dan, guide. If the citizens petition fails, does that affect this warrant at all? Or what you can do? What you can do.
It shouldn't, because, so this is a different amount of money that's already been raised. So
Okay.
we're kind of moving it. In 18, what he's doing is he's asking for the voters to now give up some of the, take some of their tax money and put it into that account with.
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
they weren't getting handicapped.
No,
The other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, or amendments regarding Article 17? Seeing there are none, Article 17 will go onto the ballot as amended, fixing the 25 cents business.
Motion to
Mr. Marchand?
restrict reconsideration of Article number 17.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Article 18, by a petition of 25 or more eligible voters of the town of Newton to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,000 to support a lake host program at the Newton Town Boat Ramp for the 2023 summer season. The Lake Host Program is a collaborative effort between New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, New Hampshire Lakes, and local lake associations. It trains and employs individuals to provide courtesy boat inspections to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive plants, such as milfoil, from one lake to another, thereby protecting public lake uses such as swimming, fishing, and boating. This article would result in an estimated 0.005, or rounded up 1 cent, increase per $1,000 of assessed value to be raised by taxes. And then there's a kind of a secondary note, which I don't think is part of the article per se, but in 2022, Country Pond Lake Association, CPLA of Newton, organized a lake host program that provided over 266.25 hours of inspection time at the Newton Town Boat Ramp. In 2023, CPLA plans to expand that to 565 hours of inspection time with a total cost of $5,300. Funding for this program will come from town support via this warrant article, a matching New Hampshire Lakes grant, and CPLA member donations. Yes.
Again, same comments as I had last time. This was voted on last year, so the difference, and I think it was the same amount of money, so the difference is really no tax impact. It says it's a tax impact because it gets renewed every year. And the other point I'd make is that people up on the pond, the lakeside people pay an adder on their taxes because it's a higher property value. This is a small amount to keep that the way it's supposed to look. So I just wanted to point out on the tax pieces, it's not really an increase.
Thank you. Yes.
Patricia Masterson, I'm an assistant lake host coordinator. And I know a lot of people might say, oh, it's not in my backyard and it doesn't affect me. But last year, the Department of Environmental Services was down 3 times, and the cyanobacteria was spreading into the town beach. So we have a beautiful resource in Country Pond, and this is one of the ways that we can educate people and, pick up on any kind of invasive species. Look at powwow and look at some of these places around us, and at certain months you can't even go boating there. So hopefully this is one of the ways that we can maintain this precious resource.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions, comments, or amendments relating to Article 18? Seeing there are none, Article 18 will go on the ballot as presented.
Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article number 18.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Article 19. By a petition of 25 or more eligible voters of the town of Newton, New Hampshire, we hereby shall request that the town of Newton, New Hampshire shall not allow any type of workforce housing till the town of Newton, New Hampshire has municipal water and municipal septic throughout the complete town. This proposed article will result in no increase in the amount to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does not recommend this article 3-1. Who would like to speak to it?
I will. Well, I'm the one that put this warrant article in, and I do believe that we do not have adequate water or adequate surge in this town. And we spoke with the governor on Thursday, and he was asked the question if the towns have the right to do this, and he said yes, we have that right. It's not a mandatory thing, and we don't want it being a mandatory thing. If a developer, it's not discriminating against anybody, but if a developer wants to come into this town and put in workforce housing, and he's willing to put water and surge throughout the whole town, then I really have no problem.
So, and I think for the rest of the board to, and they can jump in if I have it wrong, the rest of the board not recommending is in concept. I think we think this is probably the right sort of concept to have. Without the town water, we're not going to be able to support it. We can also make a list of other things we don't have in town to support it. I think the goal is to make sure we're not inviting legal trouble for the town. I don't know if Attorney Hilson wants to talk to this one, because town council didn't originally have this available until a couple days ago to kind of research this and weigh in on this. So did you want to talk to this one?
Yeah, in fact, it sprung out to me last night when I was reviewing this ahead of this meeting. New Hampshire law says you have to provide reasonable and realistic opportunities for workforce housing. You can't have a straight prohibition against workforce housing. However, if the town wants to control its destiny, there is building moratoriums that you can put into place under a different statutory section. And so my recommendation is to amend this to direct the select board to study, the possibilities for a moratorium, so in a way that if you want to do something like this, it's legal and it's enforceable, and you're not just going to get it waded through by some developer. So I think you'd be well advised to amend this slightly to direct the select board to study the possibilities for a moratorium. I think it's under 67422. And so you might get to your goal, but just through a different means.
But what you're doing is you're changing the intent of my warrant article, and you don't have that right.
You cannot change the topic of a warrant article. That's true, but.
Not the topic, the intent.
This is
Charlie,
advisory.
just hang on. Mr. Hilson's not a voter, so he's not changing anything. He's simply expressing advice or an opinion.
Yeah.
To the extent that the voters want to amend it, they can, to some extent, and whether that's in the scope or not the scope would depend on the actual amendment as opposed to, in other words, Mr. Hilson's comment is just a comment.
Right,
So-
right. I
Right,
made
so-
it, so I'll
Yeah, he's
I'll
made it.
cede-
So
I'll
to the
cede
extent somebody
balance at any
wants
time.
to propose an amendment,
So,
who's voter.
if I may,
Yeah.
as ex officio, as selectman being on the planning board, I was the one who presented this to our counsel, our legal counsel on the planning board, and I was told the same thing that was just stated, that this was illegal, according to RSA 674:59, all right? And that the way the law stipulates, and there's a bunch of surrounding issues with it, that depending on the size of the town, the population of the town, there's a certain amount of affordable housing, per se, that's supposed to be in each town. And like the attorney was talking about, some of those guidelines to what the planning board has the ability to do is make changes to some of the zoning ordinances that would allow different buildings to be able to become affordable housing, like detached units and whatever, but I'm not gonna get into a lot of it. So it is illegal. The planning board is in fact looking to approve the master plan, and they're getting a grant that they've applied for so that they can do a study and realistically look into all of this, like what is being said by the attorney, without creating a havoc. So if this was to be all voted down by the town, the planning board is doing their due diligence to keep up on all of this and to try to keep the town in the gist that all the residents of this town want to do, which is to keep the type of life that everybody has come to enjoy here, the peace and the solitude, and to not put the extra pressures like has been already stated with our police and fire department, with huge complex of affordable housing, so that they would need even more money, and we would have to employ more personnel in those departments to be able to maintain them. So that's the long and short of it, as far as what I've been dealing with it on the planning board, just to put it out there. And there's another planning board member here that can vouch for everything that I just said. So
I just want to say that I support the number 19, the petition. I think the state made a huge mistake when they presented this. They never thought of exempting small communities like the town of Newton that doesn't have water or whatever. But this is an interesting article in the paper the other day in the Union Leader. Zoning out, no more local control. I'll just read excerpts of it. House Bill, where the hell is it? House Bill 44. Case in point, proposal legislation that would allow 4 individual houses anywhere in the town, no matter if it's 1 acre, acre and a half, even those pieces of property that are, 1 unit on a piece of property. So that's scary. Whether or not they have sewerage and water at their own well. Think of that, 4 units, any place, on what we call, 1 unit on a piece of property for housing. Those are the type of things that they keep on talking about in Concord, to keep up with this. I mean, it's incredible. And if what you say is true, Bob, if the planning board just doesn't go through, even if it does, we need to send a message to the state to say, you know, you can't do it to these small communities. But like this House bill right here, boy, it would be terrible. A single lot for a home, which is our zoning, and they're saying that they can override that and do anything in this town. Thank you.
The one thing I did forget, by the way, is the town of Wyndham did get sued over this.
It was a different case.
And they
Bob.
lost.
It was a different case.
But I understand, Bob, excuse me, their wording on the way they...
That's right. Yeah.
So,
Mr. Burrow.
yeah, so if I may, I hear what everybody's saying, Jack included, that, you know, we want to take a stand, so to speak. And so council had sent last night, and I'm going to apologize in advance to whoever has to write this down because it's a long one, but I know you do. I know you do. So I'm going to propose an amendment, and we can, you know, second and vote not to do it if we want to, but shall the town vote to express the non-binding view that the planning board should study the need and feasibility for adopting a growth management ordinance pursuant to RSA 674-22 to restrict development based on the state of municipal water and sewer infrastructure in the town and other relevant considerations, with the burden being placed on the developer to show this is the case. Period. End of motion. So we got a second.
Okay, comments on that. Mr. Melvin.
I have here from Stephen Buckley, Legal Service Counsel, New Hampshire Municipal Association. Here it says, there are very narrow circumstances where a select board could conclude that a petition warrant article is so apparently illegal so that it permits refusing to place the article on the warrant contrary to RSA 39.3. One such circumstance was in Levestre versus Board of Selectmen, 116 NH 340, 1976. See attached. I think this petition article could be considered to be merely advisory, but not binding on the land use boards in the town. It is not a valid petition zoning amendment. You could review this matter with town council and seek his or her comment on this matter on deliberative session. So technically, it's a warrant article that's put there, and technically the planning board don't have to go by it.
Right, but I guess the point of the Mr. Buckley's statement related to what the selectmen could do, but in this case, we're at the deliberative session, so it's the voters who would be doing it. In other words, Mr. Burrow's presenting the amendment not on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, but as a voter. So, in other words, we have to look at that. That's no different than if somebody in the audience had presented that amendment. We can discuss the amendment as a, you know, as a potential, and then, you know, the voters get to decide.
Yeah, I think what Attorney Buckley's saying is we couldn't have pulled that off of our submission for today. He's talking about that part of the process.
Right. Now, I'm going to ask a procedural question I'm unaware of, just so I know. Was this presented as a zoning?
It was not.
It was
no.
not. Okay,
Yeah,
so it is
yeah.
not a zoning article.
All of those are typically early.
Correct. That's this was not presented as a zoning article, and it is not a zoning article.
Yeah.
It's more a procedural article. Got it. So we have the amendment pending. Discussion on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
That's what you opposed. So the amendment carries. Further discussion on the article as a whole. Yeah, can you want to read that out? Mary Jo?
Thank you, John. So,
Can I ask him to read it, because he's got it in text form.
shall the town vote to express the non-binding view that the planning board should study the need and feasibility for adopting a growth management ordinance pursuant, to RSA 674-22 to restrict development based on the state of municipal water and sewer infrastructure in the town and other relevant considerations, with the burden being placed on the developer to show this is the case.
Okay, any further discussion on the article as a whole? Seeing none, the article as amended will be placed on the ballot. I'm guessing Mr. Marchand's gonna, wait, hold it.
Can you guys retake a roll call vote on that?
Oh, for the
Yeah,
recommendation?
they will, I was just gonna let,
Yeah.
Well, you said on the ballot. You said it's gonna be placed on the
oh, yeah, but that doesn't, that part doesn't count, their roll call part. No, their roll call part, they still gotta do it, sorry, the order on that is not bound, but let's let the selectmen do their thing, and then we'll finish it up.
Okay, so I'm going to do it this way. I would move for the selectmen to recommend this article as proposed. Roll call vote. Charlie?
No.
Bob?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So 3-1.
So it's now does recommend,
Recommend as amended.
as, well, but the as amended doesn't get on
Okay.
the final ballot. But it
Yeah.
is, so it's now, it said before, does not recommend, so it will now say, does recommend this article 3-1 because the vote
Correct, yeah,
still turned out
correct,
3-1.
yep.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, so that flips the selectmen's view of it.
Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article number 19.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Oppose.
Opposed? Okay. Article 20, by petition of 25 or more eligible voters of the town of Newton, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 to be deposited into the Skateboard Park Expendable Trust Fund created in 2021 for the purpose of repairing, constructing, reconstructing, and maintaining the skateboard park located at Greenie Park. This article would result in an estimated 0.015, or about 2 cents, increase per 1,000 of assessed value to be raised by taxes. Board of Selectmen does recommend this article. Would someone like to speak to it? Do we have a petitioner?
I don't think he's
think
here.
so.
I didn't see him. But, so we talked about this earlier, right? 17 was to take the money that they raised themselves to move it around. 20 is basically saying, since they've been trying to raise money themselves, would the voters kick in some money this year to be deposited in that same expendable trust fund? As we stated earlier, one would not affect the other. So if they both pass, great. If one fails, it doesn't affect the other.
Any further discussion regarding this article? Yes, sir.
John Sylvia, resident. I just want to say that this skate park, I don't know if anybody's been down there, it's horrendous. I mean, I grew up racing BMX and motocross. I spent a lot of time, stayed out of a lot of trouble because of places like this. And I'll tell you right now, with 4 kids, I don't even let them walk on that thing. It's atrocious, and I think this is in major need, and I really hope it passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions regarding this article? Seeing there are none, Article 20 will go on the ballot as presented. Mr. Marchand?
Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article number 20.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That concludes our activities for today. So our meeting will continue on Election Day. It was a long run. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Simone, does he have a closing comment? Mr. Simone?
So, you guys,
We got to close the...
Yes, I would just like to say thank you to all the people that worked in the background to put this presentation together for us. Too many to mention: Board of Selectmen, Administrative Assistant, Town Manager, Interim Town Manager, Department Heads, Boards, Committees, Moderator. Thank you for putting this together, because I think it's been very informative and transparent for the residents of Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Simone. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'm gonna move to adjourn the select board part of the meeting. Seconded, all in favor? Aye.